everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is a Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. This is a joint plan review, a joint meeting of the School Board of Indian River County and the NAACP of Indian River County. And I would like to welcome Mr. Tony Brown, President of the NAACP, and Ms. Pinder. And there's a number of folks that are participating by teams. And I understand Mr. Hart is on his way. He's tied up in traffic or wherever. But why don't I turn it over to you, Mr. Brown, and kick us off.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
First and foremost, I would like to thank and acknowledge the chairman, Mr. Barefoot. He's done yeoman's work trying to facilitate us moving forward. He's been in the trenches, he's been listening, he's been trying to make things work. With that being said, in the last couple of weeks, I've become very much disillusioned. I've become to the point where I'm lost. Some things that have happened recently that is very problematic, bothersome. Last night, Ms. Penley can attest to the fact that we had an extensive executive committee meeting. I mean, in depth. Some of the things that are very concerning to us is us not being heard, us not being treated as equals. Some stuff that we've been talking about, and we came to a conclusion last night, which I'll get into, and Dr. Warrior will eventually fill in the blank spaces. Over the past week, matter of fact, today, I bet you I had 30 phone calls and people concerned. One of my biggest concerns is that things that are happening away from you all. You may have an intent. Mr. Barefoot, I think, is an honorable man, and the things that we talk about, I think he's serious about them, but that's not the reality of what we see. That's not the reality of documentation that we're receiving. It was brought to my attention that some of you don't even know about the transcript of the court hearing. We weren't aware of it, but my executive committee has read it again. And we are somewhat upset because we didn't get it soon enough to stop some stuff that has transpired. But I always feel that God has a plan. And his plan was not that we get it before we got it. And we are aware that you all are not understanding that this is a partnership. This is not the situation where this is my basketball, y'all gonna play with it my way, or we don't play. The courts have stated this is a collaboration. We are the plaintiff, so we don't understand recently. This thing with the equity chief, nobody asked us. Nobody conferred with us. As many of you are aware of it, we letters that have been sent to the courts that imply some things. I don't know if they're real or not real. I'm a big boy. I got my big boy britches on. But the fact that my family was involved in this is very problematic. We were not invited to sit on the recruitment and retention committee. That's an element of the desegregation order. That's an element of the 1994 agreement. That's an element of the joint plan. We were not afforded the opportunity or given a seat on the academic achievement committee. That's an element of the deseg order. That's an element of the 1994 agreement. That's an element of the 2018 joint plan. And we move forward, all of this stuff been coming up this week, like the phone calls today, and I was telling people, this is not our fight. This about certain things being racist and all of that. I don't think so. It's from our perception, we have some stuff that we're seeing in this district that we can call racist more so than some people who got out of bounds. Some people meant good, but if you read the blogs over the 12 years that I've been president, you'd be running down the road with the things I've been called and the things that have been said about me. When we're in this business, you know, I attribute something to Mr. Barefoot, and I thank him for it because he inspired me. He says, Tony, I don't know why everybody picking on you. You doing what you're supposed to be doing. I'm advocating for the children of color, especially in Indian River County. We don't understand why this is so hard for everybody to realize, talking to Dr. Jones one day, if we put this children first, all this foolishness goes in the trash. A board member brought up biracial. Anybody sitting here, what would you consider me? Just looking at me, what would you consider me? Would you consider me biracial, or would you consider me black?
Whatever you want to be considered.
No, I'm just saying, when we start throwing words around, Ms. Barrenborg, it minimizes the process. To give you an idea, my grandfather on my mother's side was an Irishman. Her mother was a West African. On my father's side, his mother was an Indian off the Sumter, South Carolina reservation, and his father was from Trinidad. So when we start minimizing the DSEG order, the joint plan, by throwing out biracial, it is about African Americans, and we have to stay moving in that direction. We have to understand that what we do for black children is going to benefit all children. We're stuck in a thing where we're playing games, and we can no longer do that. We've been said that we are obstructionists. It's our fault that we're not making decisions. So what we have decided, and I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Warrior, Mr. Barefoot gave us some astounding suggestions, and one of them that we wholeheartedly agree with is changing from a fiscal year to a calendar year. That was a total agreement. But other than that, we could not see, based on the documents, if you read the transcript from the courts, we will look like we're inept if we just sent a letter to the courts saying we were going to do this and we were going to do this. Now we're saying we're going to delay it even further. So last night, and I want everybody to know that we're on teams and they're there. After I make this statement, I will let Dr. Warrior give you a more in-depth analysis of why we came to these conclusions. After due consideration, the proposed agenda, the executive committee has directed the president to begin work with our attorneys to seek court intervention, i.e. mediation. Because we think that at least Mr. Barefoot, hopefully all of you, will sit in there and listen to what is really supposed to be going on, not hearsay, not somebody analysis of what it is, but what the court says this document says and how it should move forward. Because everybody is going on he say, they say, and it appears that when we say it, it's irrelevant. When we say it, we're making it up. When we say it, we have a false narrative going on. So we want this to move where everybody can get a clear understanding of what this is and who and what everybody's responsibility is. With that, I'll give up my time to Dr. Warrior.
Yeah.
You're muted, Doc.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, turn her up.
Yeah, okay. Trying to.
We can hear you.
Oh, you can't. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
If we could turn the sound up,
Yeah, let's do
whoever's in charge of that, that would be helpful.
Okay. Is this better? Okay. Okay. Yeah, let me. Well, I think that Tony just said a lot. Are you getting feedback?
Yes.
Yeah.
You need headphones, Dr. Warrior, if you have any.
I have wireless, will that work?
Any headphones might help.
All right. May I suggest that you start to move ahead with some conversation while I try to make this, would it be better for me to just call in on the telephone?
Hold on, yeah, let's see if we can.
Go ahead and do what you have to do, Doc, because we can't hear you.
All right.
Well, while Dr. Warrior is trying to get reconnected, I would like to point out to everybody that this is a special day for somebody in the room who has given up a lot to be here. This is Tony Brown's birthday.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the things to me has been great about this is Mr. Barefoot sits down and talks with us. He tells you he don't know what he don't know, but he's willing to listen, and he don't come in with a preconceived notion that he got the answers. It literally says he's never been, without saying it in words, he's never been black a day in his life. So he cannot do an analysis of what I feel, or how I perceive this whole situation. We got 54 years, and ladies and gentlemen, I cannot understand why we are going nowhere fast. When it takes us sitting in a room, putting all this foolishness aside, and put children out first, and do what's best for children, not a conversation, not a slogan, not window dressing. Do the hard things, do the painful things. As you all have realized in this past week, this work can be painful, can't it? This work can be, believe me, I can write a thesis on it. But in spite of that, I'm afraid of one thing. I'm afraid of God to tell me, depart from me, I know you not. I didn't tell you, Tony Brown, this was going to be easy. I didn't tell you that you was going to make friends. You got work to do. You got to do that which is for the least of mine, which is our children. And if we can't get to that point and stop putting all these agendas and window dressings and egos and all of that, I have one agenda. I'm not going to tell you I don't have an agenda. It's to stop these children from failing. It is ironic that I sit before you having went through this and now sitting here advocating for children not to continue to go through this. It's crazy. In 2021, and one of the things that I talked to the state over the week, everybody hollered about unitary status. That's not an issue. The NAACP has tracked all school districts that have gone to unitary status without solid, foundational policies set up to govern it. They have all gone bad. We used to holler, go to Pinellas County. You've heard of the failure factories, haven't you? Have any of you? You missed Dr. Schiff?
I'm sorry?
The failure factories.
No,
Yes.
I have not.
There was an article.
It's Pinellas County, where they went to unitary status, and all of a sudden they had totally definable, racially definable schools, and those that were black, all of them were failing. All of them was underfinanced. We don't have to look at Pinellas County any longer. We can look at St. Lucie County, where they're going after going to unitary status without checks and balances, without verifiables, without a foundational that's established in policy through you all, that 20 years from now, you can't say, well, for instance, the recommendations that 3 of you were part of making, Dr. Jones and Mr. Barefoot get a get out of jail free card because you were not a part of it. But there were recommendations made, and they was. So if those recommendations were made by a board with a consensus, why were they thrown in the trash? Why were they overlooked? Why was they relegated to file 13? These are the things that are problematic because if we're going to go to equity, equality, and inclusion, that's what I'm talking about. Open, unabridged, equality, equity, and inclusion, where every kid don't have to worry. Right now, your board members may not be aware of it. You have a situation at Sebastian River Middle Junior High School. Any of you aware of it?
What is it?
You have some discriminatory acts being carried out in the athletic department, i.e. the baseball program.
And what is happening?
A black kid is, who should be on the team was told he couldn't be on it, that he should be on a traveling team first, and he should do this, and he should do that. But a white kid who got kicked off the team or left the team at Storm Grove went up there and immediately was on the team. These are the things when we sit in this room talking about moving forward and checks and balances and not making things where they can be verified or substantiated or documented. We have all kind of foolishness going on. I know you're aware when we talk about racism, what is being said on the blogs and the phone calls and stuff that you all are getting, you are perceiving as being racist. Guess what? When that principal said in a meeting that she got her one black, I perceive that as being racist. But she still got a job.
Well, I know that we're talking here, and I just want to go on the record and say I haven't read any blogs, so I don't know. I have never perceived any of the claims that you're saying right now. So
Well-
that's not me. I've never said that I've read any blogs or anything out there that's proclaiming what you're stating.
Well, it's out there. But it's not. We don't perceive it as that. You know, we see some people taking advantage of a situation. We see some people who, kooks gonna do what they're gonna do, but we have to focus on what's really behind the narrative. To understand that people will play us. I can get played, you can get played, and we can get caught up in the fluff that has no foundation in reality. We don't want to, sometimes a friend of mine, my neighbor said, we can get caught up in stuff, Mrs. Rosario, where you get so far gone, you stand as a man, you stand in the front of the mirror to shave, and you don't know whether to shave or cut your own throat. Because you have fallen for the false narrative. You have sold your soul to the devil because you didn't analyze, you didn't investigate, you didn't find out the root cause analysis. And I know all of you understand root cause analysis. You must ask the question 5 times at least to get to the core of what the problem is. We have to do that. We're talking about the foundation of our children. We're talking about the legacy. We're talking about moving out of 53 years of foolishness. And it's incumbent upon you as board members. The NAACP, ladies and gentlemen, is an advocacy group, an advocacy organization. It is not to be your best friend. We are to be cordial. We are to be respectful. We are to be understanding. But my job is to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. And you can call me anything you want to, but I have an obligation to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. And if you want to call me obstructionist, if you want to call me this or that, I'm going to fight you tooth and nail to do what is right, especially for the kids of color in Indian River County who have, for the last 53 years, have not been treated fairly. I don't care what you say or how you preface it. We, as the astronauts say, Houston, we got a problem.
And on that note, Mr. Brown, Dr. Warrior is ready to go.
Go ahead,
Well,
Doc.
I'm trying to see, can you hear me?
We hear you good, Doc.
Much better.
Okay, great, because I was pretty worried. I guess I need to buy some headphones. This meeting has taken off. I almost feel like I'm playing catch up now about, what our agenda was. I mean, where we're going and where we are. We started off, I guess, with the first thing on the agenda, and I didn't hear that part, have talked about the relationship of, I think, the relationship moving forward among the two organizations. Am I correct with that? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you,
You're coming in and out, but I think what you're asking, Mr. Brown made a statement suggesting what the NAACP was advocating as a next move, and was then gonna have you explain more about how you came to that conclusion. Am I characterizing that right, Mr. Brown?
yeah, I spoke briefly on where we are and what we felt and what we had perceived over the last couple of weeks and our concerns. And then I said, after due consideration to the proposed agenda, the executive committee directed the president to begin work with our attorneys to seek court intervention, i.e. mediation. And then it was turned over to you.
Right. I think that, right, that we were supposed to look at moving forward, and where I'd like to start in terms of explanation is, again, I think this has been a really emotionally loaded and charged week, and the week is it's only Tuesday. That certainly we met with our executive committee last night with this discussion about where do we go. There was a proposal submitted. I think it came from you, Mr. Barefoot, on a weekend, Friday, to sort of look at it. And so I was just kind of checking in, is this indeed the, a board proposal? That's one of the places I needed clarification. Or were we tonight somehow to talk about the proposal around how we move forward doing business?
Dr. Warrior, this is Mrs. Rosario. Just for
Right.
clarity, what proposal were you given? Can you read the proposal so that we are all on the same page?
Let's see. Well, it's sort of long, sure. So part of so you're obviously answering part of my question, that part of this is discussion to see around the proposal, whether this is a board proposal. I was working forth from request some, let me start to him. Was that we agreed to move forward with a comprehensive 18-month report submitted to the court by August 1st, covering all of 2020 and the first 6 months of 2021. Is this ringing a bell for board
Yes, ma'am.
members?
Yes, ma'am. Just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Do you have anything else written there?
Yes, I go through about, what is it, 5, just a minute, 6, it looks like there are about 5 steps, and then some sort of reflection on it, some seeing what the pros, cons be about this. So this is, so it's basically a page and a half.
No, that other stuff I'm not familiar with. I don't know what 5 steps you're referring to. For me, anyway, I don't know about the other board members.
Okay, the 5 steps are proposals that we present the court, or we try to agree that, from what I understand is, I know that I submitted some agenda items for tonight, and that was for us to come to some closure around things like, what about the annual report for 2020? There was no decision made in it. We just haven't responded to the court. And then on the 13th of this month, I guess we have another, well, it appears that we have another status update that goes to the court. And so I'm saying we haven't talked about it, and here it is the 9th, and I thought maybe I'd missed something. And then looking at this, I thought it sounds as though it's that if we agree to have a comprehensive 18-month report submitted to the court by August 1st, is this a request of the board for us to consider sort of tolling the annual report, the next 6 months report? This is what I'm trying to get on board with right now with the plans and proposals.
Dr. Warrior,
Yes.
why don't I read for my colleagues the email that you're referencing.
Okay,
I sent it Saturday afternoon after speaking with Mr. Brown, I think, when Mr. Brown, I think it was Friday.
Friday, yeah.
Tony and Jackie, as suggested yesterday to Tony, my thought was that we agree to have a comprehensive 18-month report submitted to the court by August 1st, covering all of 2020 and the first 6 months of 2021. One of the challenges is comparing data for a calendar year, which the court has requested, and the district's fiscal year, and having those comparisons make sense. I see several benefits to this change now and going forward in submitted quarterly and an annual report on a fiscal year basis, July to June. One, this change could eliminate any excuses about the difficulty in comparing data. Corporate America frequently changes from fiscal to calendar and vice versa. No reason we can't. Two, given the challenges of COVID and the difficulty in getting a clear picture of progress on 7 of the items that require measuring, the district should be able to provide more reliable data over a longer time frame. 3, the new equity committee would have the next 4 months to get up to speed, analyze and evaluate the data, and request the changes in how it is presented. The school board would be able to approve and the district incorporate recommendations from the equity committee, including any from the Mershon committee that have been discussed by previous school boards but not voted on by this school board. 4, the 5th and 6th quarter report could be highlighted in the 18th month report to show real progress or areas that have not received sufficient attention. Perhaps recruiting is a good example, where March, April, May are prime recruiting months. 5, the district's standpoint and even the school board having the report cover the academic year, the fiscal year, enables the inclusion of very specific goals, objectives, measurement standards, as well as budget and planning implications, measured in a time frame exactly like everything else that is planned and budgeted by the district and approved by the school board. The only downside I see is yet another delay that the court may question. If the NAACP and the school board agree, however, and the lawyers can adequately explain the rationale, I believe our request would be accepted. I also feel the momentum shifting toward getting some real progress on many of the issues that aren't directly related to academic achievement, which of course is the most important in my mind. There's also a possibility that the state of Florida may postpone or cancel some of the testing that has been used in the past for measurement purposes. I look forward to your thoughts and suggestions. Together, I believe we can make real progress, although admittedly at times it is frustrating for all. After 53 years, our entire community should expect no less. That was the email that I sent to
Right, and-
Dr. Warrior and Mr. Brown.
right. And so that could be in the frame, that this was a suggestion or a recommendation from the board. I wanted to be clear about that because it addressed some of the timing issues and reporting issues that had been suggested in this agenda. It set, a context for me, a sort of framing. And so that's what I'm coming. And so as I sort of was getting slowly into this meeting, I was starting to feel very confused about the agenda tonight and what we are trying to accomplish. Because I looked at this request for the 18-month and the extension of time. And I looked back at a document, and I think I did hear Tony mention that that was the transcript from January 10th, 2020 meeting, status hearing, that Judge Williams had in Miami, and attended by, in addition to, I guess, Mr. Rakowski and Mr. DeGresta, it was Dr. Moore, and then Tony, an NAACP attorney. And getting this really late, and this is one of the things that I've learned going through with the district, my first mediation in federal court, was that judges don't talk directly to us. They will talk to us through our attorneys, or and Judge Williams very nicely in this document that I'm referring to, which, again, I'm going to assume that all of you have a copy of the 25-page transcript from that meeting. And I don't, in our attorney, we didn't know about this until fairly recently, and I was concerned. And that's an issue we've dealt with our attorney. And one of the ones that went through mediation is attorneys making decisions for clients, and then we know after the fact, playing catch up. And I think that happens to varying degrees in terms of what attorneys we were talking about. And so I looked at this and I thought, okay, the judge's pretty clear here about the first thing she said was, the reason I'm calling you all in today is obviously you don't understand the process and what I've requested of you and what my expectations of you are. And I see that as a very significant statement. And she went on for the next 25 pages telling us the kinds of things that she didn't want, the kinds of things that you needed to hear, some expectations she had of attorneys on both sides. She laid some things. And now I feel like we're going to her, and sort of, again, with us too, late in the game in terms of what her expectations are for her. And as I do each of these, and I tried to do a document, I'm very visual. And so I did draw a tape to look at the things she addressed and told us, don't do this again, or this time I'm sort of cutting you a break, and I'm going to believe the most positive of situations, and sort of cautioned about coming back. And one of the things was she didn't feel that she'd been informed. The other question she asked us is, you agreed to use certain tools, and those were things like mediation, or that was specifically mediation, and she gave us two options. She named a magistrate, judge in Fort Pierce, Judge Maynard, and she named an attorney. So one of the things she goes through, and then she even picked up on things, and what she was referencing was, you guys were supposed to do a joint report. That's what you agreed on. And I'm sitting here now with 3 reports, one from the school district, one from the NAACP, and one from the Equity Committee chambers. What don't you understand about the joint, and why did we not utilize? Because we agreed to utilize when we mediated the original plan. If we ran into some bumps in the road. And she didn't say disasters. She said bumps, even to the extent they're disagreeing about the format of a report. And that was one of the things that happened, certainly in September when it was broke down and could agree on what a report was to look like in terms of format or content. And that's when, so my concern is with the proposal presented, and one, Brian, that you talked about, that if the judge agreed. One of the things that I know that we talked about repeatedly has been said, that if parties agree to something jointly, it can happen. But I think that the part they're forgetting, are forgotten, or we overgeneralized, or for me, gotten this report from the court about what the judge expected was, that has some restrictions to it. The judge is operating on a document, whether we like it or not, and I've heard so many responses to the joint plan is this, the joint plan isn't that. Well, guess what? We both agreed to it, and we both agree that there were holes in it, or holes or issues, and some people say it's not specific enough. Well, it was never designed to be a plan. That was something that we were supposed to work out, the implementation plan for how we agreed on these high-level things. And I think we sort of lost some focus. But she talked about specifically some things that happened. And one of the examples, and I've laid it all out, but I'm not going to go through reading it. I'm just going to try to highlight some of the pieces that struck me. She told us in terms of the next report. She said, the report I received that was labeled the joint report, and she used an analogy, and she said, it's sort of if you asked a teacher, one of the teachers, and she was sort of referenced the board, if you asked her teacher for her lesson plan, And she responded by giving you a copy of her geography textbook. That's not what I'm interested in. That's not helpful. She said, what you would ask if you report, and she's assuming that you would ask for specifics, especially if this was something you were used to evaluate with her. And with her handing you the textbook she was used was an information. She said, I don't want another 52 pages of sign-in sheet. And if you look at the African American sheet plan, about a fourth of all the implementation action steps are going to be documented. Artifact is a sign-in sheet. Okay, so we've ignored her about, about all these things. She said, nor do I want a copy of a quote from, I think it was Sheryl Sandberg or something, as part of the recruitment plan. We need to be way past this, though, and that's unacceptable. And then yet, and so as I go through this up, and I'm sure that some, or probably all of you, have looked at that document and said, everything she told us not to do, we've doubled down in spades. We haven't, I can't see anything on that list, and I might be overgeneralizing, that she's asked us to produce, that we've produced, or that we've used any of the tools that she's right, that we agree to. And so for me, so talking about that, and asking, you in terms of sort of where to go from here, and I know we met with our executive committee last night, certainly with some belief in our mind, we're assuming that this proposal that the district is wanting to agree to jointly and move ahead with. And I was somewhat confused, given that I'm working from the same document that I'm assuming the district is working from in terms of the responses that the judge had to our initial fiasco in December of 2019. And she said things like, don't come before me again with these same issues. And respond that we haven't reached out and utilized any kind of intervention. And one of the things I know, and I think we did, it was explained to her, which is interesting, because if you read this is deja vu to both of us. And we're sort of doing what she said don't do. What I'm telling you is, she said, because I could do things like, I could take offense, but I'm going to give you guys the benefit of the doubt this time, that you all believed, and I know I won't, that believed that we needed to resolve this at the local level and keep going back, and going back, and believing that the mediator would save something larger. Well, it's real clear in the judge's letter, transcript, that wasn't what she was hoping. She was not wanting a disaster to move through this. And so I'm kind of lost, and I'm asking you now in a different way as topics. Are we comfortable? I mean, is this what the board is sort of presenting to us as a joint plan? And are we going to agree to ignore what Judge Williams said? She's talked about appointing a special master. She's talking about tolling, the years, and what that means is canceling out these 2 or 3 years where we're now saying, give us, give us another now 18 months, August. And this will, and this will allow our equity team to come on board with some things. In her mind, we're into 2.5 years. So she said, we agreed at the district. We didn't agree with the 3-year thing, but we signed off agreement. The district wanted a 3-year lifespan equity committee, and then they would agree to, even when if they were out, if they would do another 5 years, they were out from under supervision. And so I guess I asked you now in a different way than I've communicated with you before. It's what we really want to do to be this dismissive of a document. The judge sort of dealt with us a year ago, and we're going to stand before her, asking her for the same things, presenting her the same Sheryl Sandberg, whatever quality. The 25% of our action steps for implementation are something she told us we're way past it. These aspirations. So yeah, I'm asking you tonight in a very different way that we've indicated. Is this what we say we want to do? And right now, that's a pregnant pause, waiting for some response.
I'll jump in with a couple of things. I don't know if I can answer your question. which is when you reference the transcript, and I'm one of the people who hasn't seen that transcript, and that's, oh, sorry.
No, I didn't say anything.
Yeah, sorry, my mic wasn't on. I was saying that I realize I've been remiss. I should have requested that a long time ago. I haven't seen it either, so I don't know where you've seen it from, or if, I don't know if other board members have seen it. I have not, and I take responsibility that I should have read that a long time ago. And so now.
Well, first of all, it's our attorneys that we need to speak with, because the judge was going to only send it to the people that are registered. It would have been our attorneys. And so to the extent that, you know, we've talked to our attorney, because it was not proffered to us by our attorneys, you know, and so the document has evidently been out there floating around at least for the last year. And so we've dealt with our attorneys. So, you know, you may or may not have known that. I didn't know that until.
I didn't know it until you mentioned it, and
Right.
we've talked
And-
about this.
and-
So now I am aware that that's something I need to get, and I need to go back and read. So I
And
thank you
it's
for.
something that I'm only relative. It wasn't like I sat on it, hoarding it,
Oh,
waiting
no,
to pounce. No, I know you're not insinuated. I'm saying we too, because we felt pretty frustrated that our attorneys had not passed it on to us or seen the need or to do
Yeah,
that.
and
And that's
that-
what Tony was talking.
You know, I'll take responsibility as something that I too should have, you know, as you're alluding to, I too should have, I have relied on other people to say what happened at that meeting, and for whatever reason, similarly, I didn't think to go just get the transcript, and I should have done that as well, and I will take that on myself to do now, and so I'm requesting of our attorney to please get me that transcript. Because clearly there are things in that transcript that you are citing now that I wish I had read at the time that they happened. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. To Mr. Brown's comments and your comments about the executive committee and about what I hear you about going back to the court and requesting mediation. If that is the will of the NAACP, I support that. I will support that, and I agree, Dr. Warrior, that I would like to be present at that meeting, whether in person or electronically. So much is happening electronically now, that's easy to do. I know that in past meetings, I have heard that some board members were excluded prior to this board, several boards ago, that board members were excluded from those meetings. I would like to ensure that that doesn't happen in the future, because I think you're 100% right, that board members need to hear at the time it's being spoken exactly what is being spoken, so that we can hear that as well as the people in the room. So if this is how we go forward, if we go back to the court and go back to mediation, whether in person and preferably electronically, I would like to be on that call as well. I can't speak for my fellow board members, but I appreciate the way both of you are phrasing this. I appreciate the way both of you are expressing your experience and what you believe are the steps to go forward. And I support the NAACP in that. I support your words. I support the will of your executive committee if that is what is the next thing we need to do. So I don't know if that answered your question. But that's part of where I'm left.
So I'm sorry?
I said that's
I
part of
think
where
I
I'm.
hear my echo. So
Yeah.
what I'm asking is as colleagues, you know, as people we sit, is this what, you know, because to be in a position to say, no, we're not interested in this, we want to, but that's not what we're saying. We're saying, if you've looked at the same information we've looked at, are you really presenting this alternative and asking us to consider that? Because, and I'm really asking that because that's then is something different that I respond to tonight, that Tony's asked me to respond to.
I'm really sorry, but I'm having trouble hearing you. So if somebody heard that more clearly than me, if you could
I think-
rephrase.
I think, Dr. Warrior, if I'm understanding the question, I think you're asking if the email is exactly what we are proposing. Is that correct?
Right. and if you all think, and even reflecting now on what the judge has said to us and what she called her expectations for us, which is why she called us in January of 2020. Do we really want to stand for? I mean, well, we need.
Well,
But
the one thing that I think is that, well, there are several things that you brought up which ring true. Yes, apparently there is a transcript that this is the first time I'm hearing that the transcript is of substance. But even though the transcript exists, the judge creates this order and then sends it out in the form of, this is what you're supposed to do, 1, 2, 3. Kind of like a divorce, agreement. You go to court, you can agree on a million things. There's a transcript that talks about everything, but at the end of the day, you leave with a piece of paper that says you have to do 1, 2, 3, and 4, or whatever those would be. So maybe that's where, as board members, we're looking at the court order. We're looking at what we are supposed to do according to the actual order that's written on paper that we all have, right? That's all on the website. So as far as I'm concerned, that's what I've been looking at. That's what I have been going by personally. And that has been my guide so that when we're in these conversations, we're kind of narrowed into the focus of, let's not stray off topic. If we're talking about mentorship, let's talk about mentorship. If we're talking about, sending in the end-year report or the annual report, let's talk about that and how that is sent in. So those are the kinds of things that in my mind I have been using, why I have been using the court order in that capacity, not thinking about the transcript. But with regard to the email that you're mentioning, I don't believe that the intent of that email, which I did not receive, by the way, I don't believe that the intent of that email is meant to supplant a plan or to, be an actual plan moving forward. I think the intent may have been to suggest how we can submit an end-year report, which is overdue. It's overdue right now, correct, Dr. Moore?
Correct.
Okay, so we are overdue a plan. So I think right now I think that email was a suggestion to say, hey, let's just get this in to suffice the overdue report and say that we've at least agreed on the change in annual reporting. So instead of going to the working fiscal year, January to December, we will instead go to school year or fiscal year, which is August to the end of the year. And if we do that, we would give the equity committee enough time, to actually get up and started, the new equity committee to get up and started, to get their information, to gather whatever recommendations they want to present to us, so that in August or September, when we do submit a report, then finally, we're kind of like playing catch up. So that, Dr. Warrior, is where I kind of think that email came from. So I do not believe that email, Mr. Brown, is meant to both of you, because I think she's frozen. I do not believe that email was created or sent for the purpose of replacing anything, but sort of to kind of get us out from the delay of this last report that needs to be done. But if you all agree, as Dr. Schiff stated, if you all believe that going to mediation will work for moving forward,
one of the things that I would like to suggest, Ms. Rosario, because I hear you saying repeatedly, what I'm doing, and I'm reading this and looking at these forms, I really think, and the judge says in this, that because she speaks to the district's attorney, Mr. Picasso, She said, I understood you to be a practitioner, a federal court practitioner, which meant that she has a certain level of expectation to an attorney that can practice in the federal court level. And she says, and I understand that that the plaintiff may not have that experience, but I suggest that all of you need to get on board. So I think that respectfully, Mrs. Rosario, what you think and how you function is not necessarily what the court would agree with you on in terms of which documents you're choosing to use. And that you don't see her, that you expect to get an agreed like the divorce. It is not quite the same as that. What she has given is that she called us into a status hearing and said in that, for those of you who've read it, I mean, and to be willing to go back before without having read it, I really, I mean, the district gets to do whatever they're going to do. What we're saying that we'll do is not that we don't want to jointly do anything with you, but we believe that the judge told us some very specific things, her expectations of us and stuff, and that doesn't have to come out now as a document. She called, we had people, we had your superintendent, we had our president, we had our attorneys, and she has told them, this is my expectations. Don't come before me again, because I may look at total. She pointed out the 3 things that we can't agree on from the equity committee report, which now we realize, is all this question about, and we've not even involved her. She's saying there's some recommendations in here. What have you done with them? And we go before and we'll talk. So I hear what you're saying, but I think that is not the way the court is looking at it, or for you not to say, I expect a list that says this. That's true. You might expect that, but the fact that it's not coming, and that she's called in and basically taken time to say, I'm going to call you in face to face. I'm going to tell you that some penalties and some things that I could assess, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give you the benefit of a doubt that you weren't being dismissive of what I'm saying. So I'm just saying that we've decided that we're going to respond to that. And so if so to the extent that you also supporting our request to seek mediation, that's probably a good idea.
But we still have to have a report submitted. If we seek, and I'm going to direct this question to Ms. Reichman. If we seek, or if the NAACP seeks mediation, does an end-year evaluation still need to be submitted? What happens in that case?
Well, it doesn't change the order.
Right.
I mean,
So-
the order requires what the order requires, which is an annual report in December and then the joint.
So we still need an annual report. So the bottom line is we still need to submit something, even if, the request to go for mediation moves forward. So the question then, Dr. Warrior, is what format would you prefer, or would you want, because I heard you say that it's the format that we're not agreeing on. What is the format in which you want the annual evaluation to be in?
I was not suggesting that I was talking about that format. I was saying that the judge said you are to utilize this tool that I saw initially before I read this, that mediation was a thing needed to try to avoid and to try to invest casework out at our local level.
Yes.
I still believe that, but she says these issues, these places where we've gotten behind on reports and things like that, she said even if it's even an issue of formatting, it wasn't me saying that I have a specific format.
Okay.
I was reading what the judge, and if you could get a copy, and I would encourage you to get a copy of that document
Okay.
and look at it.
Okay.
But I can't demand it. But I guess that's what I'm saying is that after talking with our executive committee, after going through this and looking at that, we thought that we needed to be responsive to what she's directed us to do. When she told us about our expectations, when we were to seek mediation, we should have been doing it, well before we started. Now we're behind on plans, and now here's something that I'm looking at that says, let's extend it out even 18 more months.
Well,
And
I think we could, but we were on the same page in January. We were going to submit something in January, right? Mr. Brown? And then when we agreed in January, just correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory may be off, we agreed on something to submit as the annual report in January, and then I believe it didn't go through. I know, Dr. Moore, you created an annual report. It was agreed that this annual
We
report
could not
would
come to
be submitted, and
consensus
then
in September. I'm sorry, Mr. Rosario. We could not
That's
come to
okay.
consensus on the content of the report in September, at which time we made the decision to seek mediation. We began the process through the lawyers to notify the courts so we can have mediation with the judge, not to incur any cost on either side. That is what we did. In the midst of that time, Mr. Brown and myself continued to meet, and we came to consensus as a result of the new board that there might be opportunities not to seek mediation, but to return to the work, which resulted in the December meeting. And from there, I think everyone's up to
Right.
speed. So it wasn't that we
And then in
weren't.
January, a draft of report was created.
Well, we sent the initial report that was sent in December, acknowledged that same timeline and path that I just described to everyone, that we were seeking mediation. We notified the courts that we were seeking mediation, then we weren't seeking mediation, and we were going to work together. That was the information that was submitted to the courts
In December.
in December.
And then in January,
January, we notified the courts again. And what was recommended was to push the work to the annual report to January, as Mr. Barefoot read. And I think we all were on the same page with doing that to really move the work forward. And that's kind of where the
I
district
know
stands.
that I received the actual reports. I know
Yeah.
that I've received drafts of these reports, and then the next thing we hear is that we're not in agreement.
You mean as for, this is.
Both sides, that either NAACP is not in agreement with what the draft that we received, or,
Which draft? This evening? I don't.
no,
We never received an annual
We-
report
we
draft.
board-
No, we don't, yeah, we
Board
don't, there is no, we never penned an annual report.
okay,
That was on the docket to be discussed tonight.
Okay.
What would be that annual report? With the recommendation being, submit an annual report at the end of the school year, very similar to what Mr. Barefoot just said. That gives you a full year of implementation, post, I can't say post-COVID, but post the school shutdown and the reopening. So I also think it's important to add, as we go to mediation, that was day 5 on the job for me. And as Dr. Warrior and Mr. Brown speak through some of the quotes from the judge, I recall them crystal clear. And what was submitted to the judge was a piece of documentation, no offense, Katie, from lawyers that did not accurately depict the work. Or let me change that, which accurately did depict the work because there was so little work done in that previous year. And as I listened to the judge, and Dr. Warrior is capturing the intent and the level of expectation from that judge extremely accurately. You know, it was to come back and create the systems and structures to provide the documentation so we can really begin to move that conversation. The district has been completely reorganized, redesigned, new offices, new responsibilities. The expectation of equity in the system has been clearly defined. The systems of monitoring and looking at the work as it relates to African American achievement, it is significantly better. And, you know, as the board, each of you call every single 22 principals and ask about the expectation that has been set regarding this work. And by no means am I trying to say everything is perfect, but I am trying to say I heard that judge clearly and responded in very specific and intentional ways. And when we came to September, even in the midst of the pandemic, we could not agree on the content. I think a big piece of that rub, and Dr. Warrior can correct me, was we weren't intentionally or non-intentionally looking at the recommendations that were provided around the 2019. And that's really why we got to the court, because what was submitted and signed off by the lawyers was not reflective of the 2019 recommendations that were made by the Equity Committee. And that was the work that they began prior to my arrival. A great deal of those recommendations, you know, have been addressed. A number of those recommendations have not been addressed. And it is the opportunity to bring that work forward to have feedback on those recommendations. So in terms of going to mediation, it's not a bad idea because it allows us the opportunity to have a third person in the room who can listen to both sides and allow us or give us direction on the structure, the content, the level of information and the quality of information that's being provided and how it's progressed over the course of the year is a body of work that has seen significant improvement in comparison to last year. And I think if you look at what was collective evidence in 2019, it was like this thick. Versus what we have now is volumes and volumes and volumes of work. And just not sign-in sheets. If we're going to be open and honest and transparent, there is a plethora of work that is just not sign-in sheets. It is ultimately documentation of work and progress. And, you know, make no mistakes about it. In the midst of a pandemic, it is much more complex to accurately reflect progress when students are in various models. But by no means, not on my watch, have we not put in equity at the forefront of this work. And I want to go to mediation because my integrity is being questioned. It is a said, unsaid things, and quite honestly, let's get to mediation so we can evaluate, you know, the work that's being done in a way that allows us really to have open conversation and dialogue. And it is nothing that I'm not trying to do or get done, and I don't think going to mediation would be a negative thing. Ultimately, it can only help us move the work forward.
Dr. Warrior, I want to interject. A lot of you don't have the transcript, but just go into page 15. It says,
I'm sorry.
for those who have it, it says, the Equity Committee be delegated, this was a recommendation, that the Equity Committee be delegated the authority to submit status and annual reports directly to the court, and that the committee report directly to the court. We agree these recommendations, we think they are very wise and that would permit us the flexibility to try to get it back on track at its normal speed. The court response was, well, my understanding, I actually think they are good recommendations. But my understanding of your agreement is that if you wish to modify it, you must both discuss it, then present it to the court. We agree, but we are agreeing to modify this way, or we don't agree, and leave it to the court to do whatever is necessary. I have spoken over and over and over. The NAACP and the school district has the right, the ability to sit down and alter some of this stuff if we're in complete agreement. It is spoken right here. For those, and as Dr. Warrior stated, we didn't get this transcript, and we let our attorneys, as soon as we thought we should have, and we let them have it with both barrels. You all should have had it. This would have made this process a lot easier because a lot of this stuff, if you go back through the minutes, I kept putting it on the table, but it was dismissed as if it was hearsay or I was making this up. But now here it all is that the judge tells us that in the agreement, you have the ability to modify if both entities agree and then bring it to the courts.
And I can't say on the number of occasions I've said extremely publicly that the joint plan needs to be completely overhauled. I spoke to Mr. Brown when we first agreed to go to mediation, and I said, I think the root cause problem here is the joint plan. And his response was, ooh, I'm so glad you said that.
Okay.
And then upon the new arrival of the board, it switched from let's rewrite the plan, and that is the information I shared with all 5 boards. We're going to rewrite the plan. Mr. Brown is excited about rewriting the plan. Upon the new arrival, it came to be just tweaks of the plan. And tweaks, rewrite, that's, one way or the other, but never did I misrepresent the opportunity to rewrite this plan. I think the plan is extremely disillusional or ineffective. At the last joint meeting or the meeting before that, I proffered to extend the year of the plan, to add another year to it, and so we can begin the process of really implementing in an effective way. So,
I think that again, respectfully interrupt you, Dr. Moore, is that people's belief that they can just sit down and rewrite joint plans is kind of different than what we experienced in mediation. Because what Judge Graham was our mediator.
well, Dr. Warrior, my thoughts are this, and as I read the joint plan, and I wasn't there, I thought it was written by lawyers that we haven't paid since I've been here, by the way. And it didn't have educational experts in the room. So I say it again, it was a political or lawyer ploy, feel bad for you, Katie, that to get the best plan to benefit the school district of Indian River County. But I'll say it again, this plan benefits the school board, but it doesn't benefit the African-American children of this district. It can be fully implemented without improving academic outcomes for African-American children. And I think, each of us as you all as board members, me as a superintendent, NAACP, wholeheartedly agree with that statement. So I'll say it once again, to go to mediation and say, and this was, I don't want to speak for Tony, but Tony says when in one of our initial conversations about rewriting the plan, it's going to take 6 months to rewrite this plan. And I agree, it would take 6 months of going back and forth and arguing and figuring out what would be the details. But I have never seen 2 bodies that are invested in doing particular work that are having such a hard issue. So from my standpoint, just to say it again, I'm sorry, Dr. Jones.
Oh, that's okay.
It's the way the plan is written is about proof and justification versus dialogue and discourse on how to improve an educational system that's drastically under-supporting African-American children. And that's what I want to address.
And maybe I say that when we went before the mediator, who was a retired judge, that our current Judge Williams said is legendary. Yeah. That he was not just a good, but he's a legendary person. Is that he kept saying, you guys agreed to this is a contractual thing. And so I think that's of our interpretation and what we can do and stuff, just rewrite the joint plan. And that's something that can be discussed in mediation, maybe seen slightly differently by the court than what we're doing and how easily we can do that. But I'd like to hear from somewhere else, because I'm truly not trying to convince you all.
So Dr. Jones wants to speak, but I tell you, I've seen the transcript. I've had it for quite a while. Dr. Jones has been waving it around here.
This was in our, I say, back-to-school training for new board members. It's
Yeah,
in my
exactly.
litigation packet.
I've had it for quite a while.
Yeah, I've had it.
Mrs. Barrymore?
Dr. Moore,
Nope.
Dr. Jones, if I would.
You're not letting me go.
From day
The
one,
superintendent doesn't even have it.
from day one,
It was that board packet from the attorney for litigation. That was in that notebook.
what I wanted to say
Can
is,
we respectfully, Tony, let the hear from the board?
I just wanted to clear up something, Doc. The fact about this rewriting, I said tweak from day one. This document, as the Judge Graham said with the original DSEG order, whether you like it or not, the Indian River County School District signed it. You cannot arbitrarily change it. You don't have this, let it or try to work through the bad spots, but just to say, oh, I don't like this. And it was not just lawyers. There was Indian River County School District employees that had their hands on this document, because Dr. Warrior and I was in the room. It was a lot of lawyers, but it was also some district staff who had their hands on it. Go ahead, Dr.
Okay.
Jones.
Just a few points. Again, I've had that since I got my training. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. If we go to mediation, and I'm not sure I agree with that, but be the will of the board, but I don't want another penny spent on this. You know, we were having discussion earlier about the new equity positions and salary and so forth. Doesn't anybody ever bring up over the $1 million we spent for partial unitary status on 3 components that we've had in this district for a while, but to support staff, administrative staff, and facilities, over $1 million. So again, whatever this is, I do not want it to cost money. That needs to go into our classroom. Now, question for the attorney. This joint plan signed in 2018 is a contract, correct? Joint plan 2018. Okay, that is a contract. So whether we go to mediation or not, I would still like to propose to Mr. Brown respectfully and the executive board of the NAACP, why are we really past that point of looking at collaboration, total collaboration to tweak this? Are we really past that point? That's my second point. And when I looked at the equity report, the transcripts from January 2020, and I saw Dr. Moore's response at the end. He had been here a week, and he said it was not complete. He wanted to do a lot more work on that. So obviously, that has changed. But also, with our new equity committee and our equity chair, and looking at the recommendations that were made in that October 2019 meeting, are we still past the point where we've got to have somebody mediate us? Can we not continue to look at this? I just, this is all about our students. From day one, we know getting students ready for kindergarten is important, and I just want to continue to, push that. I don't think we're at that point yet. That's my opinion. Mr. B?
Well, what we're looking at, nothing has, in our opinion, nothing has changed. It's a roller coaster. We're going around in circles. You all, and that's why I commended Mr. Barefoot in the beginning. That man has bent over backwards to try to make this thing work. We have tried to make it work. But we talk in this room, and then we go look at documentation. I was going to do something tonight. I was going to bring the new African American Achievement, I think, which is about 300-400 pages. Then I was going to bring another one, which was about 40 or 50 pages, that we threw in the trash that was better than the one with 300 and some pages. And we're looking at this stuff. And we're saying, are we stupid? It's kind of like Mrs. Pender said in the outer office. Do we look stupid? We are reading this stuff. We have to make this stuff verifiable. We have to make this stuff real. It's not window dressing. It's not checking the box. It's, can what we do today be sustainable 20 years down the road? And if the board, which we're finding out now, has not even read the transcript to know what the judge instructed us to do, then we got a problem, because we are reading this stuff and we're understanding. I have the equity committee, even going to mediation, we don't want to stop them. Let them continue to do what they're doing. Right. But I think that somebody needs to let you all understand that the NAACP is not making this stuff up. That this is a partnership, that we carry equal power in this process. It's not no bullying. Go ahead, Doc.
May I speak to Dr. Jones, a point you're making, and I agree with you, that I still very much push that we do this at the local level. But the judge, as you read her transcript, sees it as something completely different, because we've struggled, we've not gotten things done. I mean, and among ourselves, the climate to me feels really difficult to get work, done in there. Allegations of this, and Dr. Moore said, at times how it hurts the heart, and that his integrity has been questioned, and we believe all of that. And so, the judge has said to us, Don't wait till you get yourself to the point where you feel like you can't work together again. She doesn't see it as last-ditch effort as we seem to see it, Dr. Jones. And I think that maybe I would have stopped arguing for that if I understood that she saw it if we just didn't, like when we, the 6-month report back in September, that we couldn't move beyond. The fact that we now probably aren't going to make the March 13th date because we haven't come up with the joint plan. The fact that we haven't been ended. Now we've got to go back to court and to mediation. And the way it's structured is the Judge Williams said, I don't talk to clients when they're represented, when they have representation. I talk to attorneys who talk to their clients. And if clients want to talk to me, they have to ask, if clients have questions, they have to either ask their attorney or ask their attorney if they can ask me. So there's a process that we learned about, not that I know a lot about this, but I went through a horrible time in 2017 when we were trying to mediate this, and it was much more contentious because it wasn't like you all saying we want to do things in the best interest. We had a real it was a win-lose, and that's the way it played out. And somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose, and the people with the most money and whatever, and the most expertise. We didn't, Tony and I didn't have it. You know, I think they called themselves winning, and they really didn't win because the judge even challenges a comment that she said was made by one of those attorneys for the school district about something about NAACP as my number, and I just need to get this report in on time. And the judge took that, the attorney to a task for that kind of attitude, you know, about this work that she sees, agrees with us. It is about our kids, and it's important, and you don't make those kind of capital statements. So, Dr. Jones, I understand where you're coming from. I don't know if, I mean, you guys have got more dollars to spend than certainly we have as the, you know, a local branch of the NAACP, not the national organization. So, I mean, I don't know, unless, like you said, there was some way that we could miraculously make this work. We've been struggling with this now going into the 3rd year of a time frame that the judge that was the district wanted put on me for some reason. And just, we're back at, for those of you who just come on, like you and Mr. Barrington, we're still back at basic questions of information. And one of the things now is when I was looking at the district's the informational libraries or the artifact libraries, and it says things now that are back, that what they have there are assurances. And what there are people signing off, your assistant super saying, we assure you that we've done the work. I really doubt that that's going to be, and you can take that forward to mediation if you want, but I really doubt that an assurance that's initial and dated is going to tell the judges that we've complied with implementation that needs to be viewed and monitored. And I'm saying that's several steps backwards from other documents. And not only was it said that we will give you an assurance, it's your evidence that we will give you data if requested. I mean, that's...
Dr. Warrior, let me interject a couple of things. The other day, for the first time, I saw these assurances that Mr. Bass, Mr. Meyer, Ms. Dampierre, I guess Mr. Fagan signed. And I'm not being critical here, but the problem is there's statements made or affirmed, but what's lacking is any documentation to back it up. So that's number one. Number two, and Mr. Brown just talked about a plan that thick versus that thick. Just yesterday, I got a copy of Moxley's plan, which was, I guess it would be 1819. And then the one with the brown cover is 1920, and then the new one is 2021.
Right.
The 3 plans, and actually, I was showing Dr. Jones just the pile. You're right, the one that Dr. Moore inherited was half the size of the other 2, and I'm not being critical or supportive of either. The difference at quick glance to me was there were actually deliverables, very specific standards that were to be met, whereas the other plans are more general. They're not, and one of my comments early on was the lack of specificity is what makes this a challenge. And you hear what you say, but prove it, sort of. The other comment I would make, and I know Mrs. Berenborg would like to speak as well, you sit here and you listen, and there's expectations that the NAACP has based on the last meeting at the court. And it's pretty clear in there what the judge expects. And yet, there's also been agreement by, I'm listening, by Mr. Brown and Dr. Moore, that some of these, particularly the academic achievement plan piece, not the recruiting numbers, not the discipline issue, or those kinds of things which frankly are more easily quantifiable. The problem is that while everyone's agreed that it needs to be changed or modified, whatever word you want to use, agreement on how is missing. So we're still sitting here with an expectation to meet what the court has requested versus what is agreed upon, and Dr. Moore and his staff have put in a lot of work. But it's like two ships passing in the night. Along the way, we need, if we're going to, as Dr. Jones suggested, if we're going to keep this, try and get this back on track, if in fact it's off track, we've got to get everybody on the same page here. Because the expectations and what's being delivered are missing the mark based on, if the founding document is that January 20th of last year, or I guess it's 2 years, no, last year, if that's the basis for a lot of the disagreement or misunderstanding, it's not easy, but I would think, and I sort of support Dr. Jones. I mean, you know, when I sit down with Mr. Brown, sometimes it's scary how much we agree. The trouble is we're not making any progress. And I don't know how to necessarily change that, but just my thoughts. Mrs. Berenborg, you wanted to offer a few comments.
I agree with you on the progress part. That's the problem. And I think it's because things have been so gray. There's not a, like you said, specificity. When you're looking at some of the documentation, it's a narrative. It's not easily agreed upon because you can interpret a narrative differently than maybe the superintendent interprets the narrative. And I think that's the issue. So if mediation helps with making it more specific and getting us from a gray to literally getting exactly what our points need to be, then we're all speaking the same language. I think that's been what you've said all along, is that we're not speaking the same language. And that's why I feel like we keep going around in circles, is because, and you feel the same way, because, you know, you're saying, well, this isn't meeting it, and whatever superintendent you've been dealing with has said, no, we're meeting it this way, and those are two different ways to look at the same issue, but they're not necessarily agreeing. Is that how you kind of interpret it too?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, you know, my concern is, yeah, this transcript would have been nice to have. I do know that the attorney, when we first came on, she meets with all of us and sits down and gives us all of the different documentations and legal court proceedings that are going on with cases that are active. And so it's our job to go through and read it all and so I have my file, right? And it's on my desk. I meant to bring it here because I'd like to fish through it when you're referring to page 15. But then I realized, wait, I don't have that page 15. So I think what happened with the three of us is that came last year when you went down to Miami, correct? The four of us. And I guess Suzanne gave it to the new board members as part of your packet that she works with on the first day. But I guess it slipped through the cracks to give it to us. So I apologize for that. Didn't know that that was something I should have. So now I'm glad it's something I'm going to receive. So it is nice to know as a board member when you're looking at what is Tony Brown upset about, what is the superintendent saying he's going to do, and what's the judge saying that we need to do? Because I've always gone back to my court papers
Every time I'll say, wait, we're getting off topic, we need to go back to what is the court saying we have to do? Because that's literally, in the end, that's what we have to report to, is the judge, you know? But in the whole matter of this, I think everybody in this room wants to do what's best for kids. We want to do what's best for our African-American kids, and like you said, that will bring all kids up. And so I'm not sure if you saw our workshop today,
So, just a bit.
some of it, okay. So, you know, the word equity came up. That was a lot of a question. And we've been dealing with phone calls and emails about that, obviously with the position that was posted. So it's interesting because even the word equity is interpreted differently from different people. Believe me, I heard it all week. And it's interesting once you start to tell people, you know, your perception of what you think equity is, they said, I didn't even think of it that way. You know, it's kind of interesting when people don't have the same understanding of even a vocabulary word.
I have one left.
Dr. Jones, yeah,
Just
go
one
ahead.
thing. Mr. Brown, I'm going to quote you. Page 40 of the October 2019 meeting. I'm certain you have heard stories about the unwillingness of the NAACP to work collaboratively with the district. Let us reassure you that is not true. When the school board decided in 2016 to have direct conversations with the NAACP, I'm sorry, I did that wrong. I am certain you have heard stories, okay. Let us reassure you that it's not true. When the school board decided in 2016 to petition the federal court for partial unitary status, it also decided that though they would no longer have direct conversations with the NAACP, the desegregation order impacts the student, families, and communities in Indian River County. I don't want to be accused of not having conversations with the NAACP. And since those conversations weren't had, $1 million was spent and more, and partial unitary status, which, you know, where did that get us after $1 million? So I want to continue to have those conversations, and I just wanted to say that.
Well, as Dr. Warrior said, in the perfect world, we want the same thing, but we are tired of being manhandled, not taken seriously, maligned, called obstructionist, because one of the get out of jails has been that 3 of you didn't have this. This is very important, and if you go to the minutes, I constantly kept referring to that meeting when the judge
did.
spanked the district.
You did.
She straight out spanked the Indian River County School District, and if you read this, you can see it because of the obstructionist tactics that were being used. And to us, we are tired. Our children are steady falling behind as we do this, going around the maypole. Our children, Dr. Warrior did the analogy of when we first started. Kids were in kindergarten. Look where they are now, and we're not going anywhere. We are caught up in who's going to win, checking the box. I want something as, and I think, Mr. Barefoot, you put it, show it to me, give it to me. Let me see in real time what you've done and how, and as I mentioned before, this is not going to work until the board make this stuff policies and procedures. Because the new board, just like with the recommendations that the previous board made, new board come on, new superintendent come on, they go in the trash. People talking about the one teacher. Think about it. That day when we first met, Ms. Barenborg, Dr. Schiff, Ms. Rosario, you were there. It was an awesome moment. And in there, we inserted 5 teachers per school, African American.
The recommendations you made.
Yes. And everybody agreed. Now we're back, oh, well, we got 1 at every school. Really? Is that something for us to pat ourselves on the back or shout hallelujah? When for 53 years, we've been stuck in this spot? This is what we want. We don't want this court. We don't, but something has to change to let you all know that we equal. We're equal in this process. That you are not the big boys, that the superintendent don't have the final say-so,
I'm sorry, the superintendent doesn't what?
have the final say-so. That we collectively have the final say-so. It referenced in here 100 times over the years that this is between the Indian River County School District and the Indian River County NAACP.
I know. I
That's-
agree with you, but we have to also agree that he's our CEO. We have to agree that at the ground level, ground zero, the one who's doing the work is our school superintendent. We're not doing the work. We're not here every single day. We're not. We're not in the schools. We're not the ones who are actually taking this plan and making it work. The
But-
people under Dr. Moore are doing it. So, yeah, the court order says our name, and yeah, he is responsible to report to us, but we have all given him, and we have to, because he's the one who has to take the plan and put it into action. He's responsible for making sure, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to point at you. He's responsible for making sure that the equity committee gets everything that they need. He's responsible for making sure that people are in place to get the room ready and to get the podium or the microphone or, you know, the screen ready and technology and all that stuff, and to get them the data that they need. We're not the ones who are doing that. So even though we're on this plan, we rely on Dr. Moore to give us the feedback on what's happening on a daily basis. So we can't dismiss Dr. Moore in the process, Mr. Brown. With all due respect, I hear you, and yes, it is ultimately, at the end of the day, it's going to rest on this board of 5 members to say yay or nay. But on the daily basis, you know, who's working the plan regularly, who's actually creating it with his people to make sure and let us know feedback, this is doable or this is not doable. I mean,
Okay.
we can agree, you know, that people are going to play, I don't know, soccer, you know, at lunch. But if, I just say that as a very facetious, but if Dr. Moore says to us, you know what, that's not doable, it's not appropriate, or it doesn't fit, or we don't have the funds for that, or, you know, it can't happen because of X, Y, Z, then we've got to take the recommendation of the superintendent and come back to the table and say, okay, that's not going to work. So I hear you, Mr. Brown, I hear you, and I'm listening to you. And yes, at the end of the day, it is up to us. It is up to the board members to make the final, you know, decisions, and then Dr. Moore has to do whatever we tell him. But
Okay,
as a board member, I cannot function without knowing that he's on the same page with us, because when I go home, I go home. He's the one here at 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And so to that extent, you know, I needed to share that much, you know, as far as the joint plan is concerned. But I do, can I ask legal, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I know you were in the middle. Can I ask legal a question? Yeah, is that okay? Ms. Reichman, with regard to the court order the court transcript that Mr. Brown references, and he does reference it a lot. I'm assuming you weren't a part of, because I don't know, no, Mrs. DiAgresta was here when the new board members came on board. What are board members responsible for legally with this, with everything that's going on with the desegregation order? Are we responsible to follow the joint plan that was given to us as it was written, the one that we've been following, or the transcript? Because I have already sent in an email to Mrs. DiAgresta
Yes.
requesting the transcript.
Yes, and you will get that tomorrow.
However, what are we responsible to follow? The transcript, which has much more in detail, or the written court-ordered joint plan? There's a big difference there.
That's right. And the joint plan is ultimately what lays out the detail that we have to follow.
Okay.
If there's something that you don't understand in the joint plan, you might want to refer back to the transcript to see if maybe the judge made some kind of statement that would help you
Got
to
it.
interpret it. But yes, the joint plan is the, as Dr. Jones put it, the contract between the parties.
Okay. Okay.
Mr.
Brown.
The bottom line here is the word's accountability. We're held accountable because we're named as the defendant in this lawsuit. We, whether it's the 5 of us or 5 other people. And we in turn hold the superintendent accountable. And what does that mean? It means that you agree on goals and objectives, much of which are laid out in that transcript, the expectations. You agree to standards that you will use to measure progress. They can be negotiated. They have to be achievable, realistic, but very specific goals. And it gets back, and I remember I've had these conversations with Dr. Moore early on, maybe even last summer before the election. The thing that this, it seems it's very process-oriented and not results-oriented. And in business, to measure something that requires very specific goals and objectives. Now, the academic achievement is, there's plenty of data around. I'm getting an education in data. It's hard to compare, actually. Some of this data doesn't track, frankly. I don't understand it. I've got a meeting tomorrow. I'm going to get educated. Again, Mr. Brown, it doesn't make sense to me. In fact, earlier this afternoon, I know Dr. Jones is very familiar with the history because she's been in the districts for so long. I said, explain this to me, because I was having a hard time connecting the dots. So there's a lot of this lack of specificity, I think, is part of the problem. But at the end of the day, we are accountable, and we hold Dr. Moore accountable, and he in turn holds the staff that's asked to put together the plans that are required in order to move this process along. I think that I don't know how we do this. There's smarter people in the room than me. But it's clear to me everybody's got the best of intentions. But I said at the last meeting, this flight of the foo-foo bird, I won't repeat it. But it just flies in ever decreasing concentric circles until you know what happens. And that's sort of where I've been in this kinds of situation before, and it's very frustrating. Particularly when everybody's well-intentioned, but we're getting nowhere.
My recommendation, just to kind of proffer a suggestion or recommendation to move the work forward, is that you do in fact start anew and look at the creation of a clearly defined joint plan, clearly defined matrix where you can in fact engage in the dialogue where it is in fact collaborative. And as the CEO of this organization, the joint plan is the driving force. And there were recommendations that were good recommendations that were made. NAACP feels some of those recommendations weren't acknowledged. And I've told you all, some of those recommendations didn't even come to me till significantly later in the year. The best course of action is to engage in the dialogue and say, let's look at mentoring. What are the goals? What are the deliverables? What is the expected timeline? Whether it's a year, whether it's 2 years, or 3 or 4. We have to come to consensus on the structure of what is going to be done, how it is going to be done, versus a kind of going backwards. There's a volume of work that has been done that is yet to be evaluated, and it is very, very hard for me as your CEO to get it from both sides. The NAACP is not happy with the work product as stated, or the assurances or the work that can be provided, and you have staff who's doing more work than they've ever done around this specific area. And yeah, that's exactly what staff's supposed to be doing, because that's the priority. But the next step is to engage in the dialogue regarding that particular work. Now, even in that work, maybe ahead of time, we define, hey, this is what evidence should look like. So we don't have to have if we know it's a problem now, it can only be a problem in the future if we don't plan to address it. So if sign-in sheets or documentation or these products, whatever they would be, define what they would be ahead of time. That's the dialogue that creates the plan, that ensures, and it's meaningful work. It's just not work to be done, that allows us to really engage in the conversation or the dialogue in the here and now about what's done. And I'm proffering to you, this board, a recommendation that says that under the current structure of the joint plan, we need to work with the NAACP to propose a new plan that has clearly defined goals, in which we both agree upon. No one feels forced to sign something, and that would be create a time frame. This is how long it would take to begin that initial work. But some of the cycle that Mr. Brown speaks of, your staff, my staff, feels exactly the same way. Here we go again, and that's not no one's intention. But clearly defining the rules of engagement, who's responsible for what, creates the relationship that we equally desire to move the work forward. And I just can't see another way to take a pause and say, you know what, let's not try to fix what is fundamentally broken in terms of the structure of the plan. Let's engage in the dialogue or conversation around where the plan needs to be. And I think there you're entering into a new agreement, not an agreement that is broken in some ways. And that's a lot of work, but that may be the work that allows us really to be productive. And it puts me in a situation not to defend the district's work or to defend the change of process or the recreation of those things. It puts Dr. Warrior and team and Mr. Brown in a situation not to say, prove it or show me or give you the documentation. I created the assurances because principals couldn't get their job done and couldn't get in classrooms. I created the assurances because the volume of work to document it. So the assurances says, document that it is there, it's created, it's established. Was that a decision made in the best interest of children? My answer to that, yes, it was.
Yep.
Yes, it was. Does it make the life of the NAACP a little bit more complex? Does it allow them to question just as they are? Well, we've had issues with this district for 54 years. Now they're saying, oh, here are these assurances, trust me. Okay, I get it. But by no means, are these school doors not open in terms of the volume of work that's being done? So that's my recommendation. Stop, reorganize, create a new plan that's not 500 pages, that is very specific in terms of what we're doing with each of the areas, the time frame that defines when you hit X goal, the X goal, then you've achieved that particular area, and not the number of teachers. We don't disagree on the number of teachers. It matters. I think 5, depending on the size of the school, is also an undersell. It should be a certain percent, depending on the volume of the school. So there's certain things that we can do to create where we're the authors of this plan, and we agree. We script it, we write it, we define it, and we implement it collectively.
Dr. Moore, you mentioned evaluation, evaluating the plan. If we were to get there to create a new plan, but either way, you mentioned evaluating the work within the plan. There's nothing in this joint plan, nothing in the court order actually indicates who evaluates it. There is no evaluator in here. There is no one not the NAACP who's responsible for evaluating it. The equity committee is not responsible for evaluating it. The equity committee is only responsible for evaluating whether we are doing what is in the plan and then providing recommendations. But no one actually
No,
evaluates.
correct. It is providing
So
feedback on
ultimately, it would
progress.
fall on the school superintendent to evaluate whether the work is done. And then, in other words, if the plan says that we are providing mentoring, right? No one is in here is actually evaluating whether the mentoring is actually getting done, except through the equity committee. The equity committee gathers together and they talk about whether we are implementing it, and they look, but the word evaluate is very specific versus observing and providing feedback. So can you clarify that? Or maybe we need a legal
Let's not go-
understanding of
let's
that,
not go
because
that
that's
direction.
another thing that we're throwing around
But
here,
it-
is
it-
I
the
may-
evaluation of it, and I think that's a big,
Maybe
I think that is why we need to go to mediation. Because, see, you're making assessments. The equity committee is to monitor compliance.
right, that's right. No,
That
I
means to
agree.
evaluate whether you're doing the job or you're not. See, we're playing with semantics
Yeah.
again, we're playing with words, and until somebody sits there and say, wait a minute, it's like when Dr. Warrior and I first started out, people wanted to say, include minority. No, the DSEG order said African American. And when people start flipping and flopping, there has been a multitude of work done over 3 years with the existing plan. Part of it was the recommendations that were overlooked when we went here. Then again was the recommendations that Mashawn and them made last year. If not to say, I don't like it, I'm gonna do it all over again, Find out what is good, what is bad, and what is indifferent. Let's take these recommendations, let's use them, and I keep going, when you get this document, go to page 15.
I will.
And you will see where the judge say, according to how she interprets this plan, that if both parties sit down and agree, then you could come before her and then you can modify. It's a misinformation going on here that it don't seem like we're like, Mr. Barefoot say, we're ships passing in the night because people won't using their interpretation. Dr. Schiff says we're using the same word, but they're coming out with different meanings. The equity committee is to monitor the compliance of the school district with the plan.
Yeah, and monitoring, the definition of monitoring is observing and checking the progress.
But in this
So-
case, it's to make sure you are doing what you're supposed to be doing.
And at the end, they provide recommendations to the school
If
board.
you're not.
Well, we haven't even used, the equity committee has just begun. So why aren't we
No,
giving them an
the equity
opportunity?
committee- The equity committee has not just begun, the equity
The
committee.
new
is-
equity committee, let me clarify,
But
the
we
new,
but we don't start, the intent is not to start all over every year when the equity committee.
we're not starting over. We have a new equity committee that needs to work. They need to work. They need to.
This is why I'm not interested in having this, again, we're into, like you said, we need to go to somebody because this is where we are. We don't agree on things. We don't agree on interpretations. We don't agree.
Well,
And
if
that's
we were
fine.
to go to the 2018 joint plan, it actually indicates the role and responsibility of the equity committee. So we can't ignore the work of the equity committee because the work of the equity committee is critical to this process. We can't ignore it and we can't just push it aside. We have new equity committee members who have joined the equity committee just recently.
So my
We have to
next-
give
I'm
them an
sorry.
opportunity to,
But you don't get to, I mean, every 2 years, we'll count on that board facility changing.
Right.
I hear you.
That's
And
true.
this scenario, this is why I agree.
That is
And
true.
where we come back to the fact that we need to move to mediation, because even in this basic little, stuff, we can't agree. We don't agree.
So can I,
Mike.
If I could, Dr.
mic
Schiff.
is on.
All right.
I thought it was, mic is on. In an effort to kind of move us towards some resolution for tonight, I hear three clear suggestions. I hear from Dr. Jones that we continue to work towards some form of collaboration. I hear from the NAACP, let's move towards mediation. And I heard from Dr. Moore, let's rewrite the joint plan. And I hear from Mr. Brown that he would prefer to tweak that. And I think rewriting the joint plan is meant to be inclusive of the recommendations of the previous equity recommendations. The equity committee that was in place prior to this one, and that the joint plan would reflect those recommendations. That's what I hear. I could be wrong. But I hear three clear directions here. Could we get perhaps, are we at a point where we can get some consensus on which of these three is the direction we'd like to move forward? Because I think then the next conversation is what kind of report do we make to the court? Do we make an annual report? Do we go to an 18-month schedule? That's the other piece of this conversation we have to wrap up.
So hearing that there's not a consensus on rewriting the plan, next recommendation is very similar to what Mr. Browning did, Mr. Browning. What recommendations that were made in 2018 is the school board directing me to fully implement? I can provide an item to the board that identifies the work that was done or the work that wasn't done within each of those 54 recommendations. It is the direction of this board to say that supersedes the joint plan, which Mr. Brown says, if we agree, then that is the joint notification that we would make, that these 54 recommendations, the governing body of the school board, along with the agreement with the NAACP, say these are the matrix or objectives in which we're going to do this work. And if that is the next step, then that would be the next step. So if it's not to rewrite, then it is to look at, and I think that is a proposed next step.
So whatever you choose, and let's take that for instance. Up front, not after the fact, up front you agree on how you're going to measure the results. The problem is everybody agrees on a goal, but once the work has been done by the district, the work product that's been produced doesn't meet the standards set by the judge, by the court.
I don't know that work product that did not meet the standard of the judge was 5 days for me on the job. I'm
I'm
very
saying.
confident the quality of the work may not be perfect, but it's much better.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the quality. All I'm saying is that the standards by which you're going to evaluate the work against the goals set forth, you have to agree to those up front.
I agree.
Because what's happened here is there's these general goals and objectives, and you and your team and prior teams are working hard to get there. But when the products deliver in draft form, it doesn't meet the expectations of the NAACP, and this document or prior documents are the frame of reference most of the time. If I ran my business like this, I'd be out of business. You got to agree on goals, and you got to agree up front on how we're going to measure progress.
I agree.
Otherwise, people get very frustrated because they put in all this time and effort, and you end up with a lot of activity and no results that are satisfactory to the parties involved. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating for you, for your staff, and obviously for Mr. Brown and his team. And frankly, for me, and I suspect for all of us. So whatever's decided, my suggestion is work with Dr. Warrior, Mr. Brown, whomever, and have a point person. It can be you, or it can be whoever's lucky enough to be in that role, and pick these 5, 6, 7 things, and there's 54 recommendations or action plans. Actually, the last time we met, I think there were 89, with about 50 or 60 related to academic achievement, that part of it itself. And you could take the recruitment. Now, Mr. Brown said earlier, there's a recruitment committee, but nobody from the NAACP is on the committee. To me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, it'd be nice to have the NAACP out there advocating for the district and trying to attract the kind of people that can make, kind of teachers that can make a difference in the lives of these kids.
I agree.
One person on that committee I do know is Ralph Turner. He's the new he's been here a year, the COO of the hospital. He's fabulous. And I know Greg Stewart, and I guess he's the chairman of the committee. It doesn't really matter, but to not have who the chairman of the members are, but to not have a representative, too, of the NAACP, I can't think of better salespeople for the opportunity in this district than the people who stand to benefit the most from this part of what needs to be accomplished. I mean, it's sort of a perfect example. I don't know how these things evolved, but that would be one specific goal and objective: reconstitute or add a couple of people, however you want to do it.
Doors wide open.
You've got I met with Beth Hofer. I like 95%, and Mr. Bass the other day, of the recruitment pitch. It's tough in a virtual world to interview and recruit, but other people are doing it. Somebody said to me yesterday, you mean you can't go to University of Michigan to their educational school and convince someone that's sitting up there freezing their butt off that this wouldn't be a bad place to work?
Your mic just cut out.
Here.
What's that?
It's a sign you've been
Maybe
speaking
that's
too
a
much.
signal. Yeah. I'm good.
You want to grab?
But at any rate, I think whatever you decide, we've got to agree on what the objective is and how we're going to measure progress.
We put everybody
We're
to
going to
work
be
here.
sitting here 3 months from now, debating whether all the work that's been done, people are going to just be frustrated.
Oh, I need direction. And if the direction is to continue to work at the NAACP, to define what actionable goals or recommendations we would be implementing, absolutely, all on board. If it is, I think probably the first response or address would be the NAACP and their desire to go to mediation. Is it to go to mediation and seek those same things while in the midst of mediation with a third party to help and assist?
My biggest concern is that this board understand what they're doing, their responsibilities to this and to us and to each other. Because I don't think it's evolved. Because as Mrs. Rosario was saying about the present committee, this is where you threw the first recommendation in the trash. Then you turn around with what Mashawn Green submitted the second time, and it gets thrown in the trash. So now we're to the third equity committee, and we're supposed to wait. If those recommendations were brought forth, it would have automatically tweaked the joint plan. That's what Mashawn, all that work that young lady and those people did, they didn't get paid. They did not receive a dime. They got a drink of water for the hours that they invested. And I don't know how you understand how that felt, that everything they worked so hard, hours and hours, went before the judge and she called the district out. So you're going to make it an attachment? You're going to make it an exhibit? And now we turn around a year later, and the equity committee does the same thing, and it's not adhered to. So if we talk about redoing the plan, we've never allowed the existing plan to work. It was foolishness from day one. My concern, and I know my committee, executive committee, I have to follow their lead. And they was very irate, to say the least, because they feel we're being taken for granted. They was highly upset that I'm being the scapegoat. I'm a big boy, I can handle it. But we're not being treated fair in the back room. And until the board understands, the board, and Mr. Barefoot, thank you, accountability and responsible. Mrs. Rosario, in that courtroom in Miami, that judge didn't say nothing about no superintendent. He said, I don't know who, but one of you from the school board signed this document. That's why I was proud that Mr. Barefoot said, wait a minute, my signature needs to be on these documents. Because as Mashawn Green said over and over, we are supposed to monitor the superintendent and his compliance with this joint plan. You can't have it both ways.
And may I clarify too, Tony, is two things you said important. That I would be reluctant, given our lack of progress, to talk about sitting down and redrafting the joint plan. That's a huge, huge effort, and you acknowledge that, Dr. Moore. Because for me, it becomes a trust issue, because I think some issues have not been addressed about how we work together that cause problems. You know, and so the recommendations from the Equity Committee that the board is pointed out, Brian, that the board never approved. You know, they didn't accept them, they didn't reject them, they didn't present anything else on the table to the NAACP. That if those things had been made, then they would have been incorporated, could have been incorporated after there was a year of trying it out into the joint plan and changing it gradually. Because I'm really hesitant, given our lack of ability to move forward and do anything. But with a piece that says, let's look at it, let's put this in place, and the part that you suggested that I'd like to hear expanded on more, Brian, around clarification up front and things we agree on. It's getting into, you know, halfway through the implementation period and then saying, oops, no, that's not the way we saw it coming. So for me, it's two things to gradually move, but to put on the table at the place we are with our inability, I mean, you know, we will agree, as I think we always do in good faith, and then we go off and we come back with something completely different. So I could not support Tony or sell to our agency that we agree to reopen the joint plan. I mean, we can't even get the academic achievement plan. We can't get a 6-month status report. So to go there take me a while. And I think the recommendations made to you from the Equity Committee would be a place to start. If you all analyze it, you know, Dr. Moxley went through and laid out some chart, you know, look at that. What are you going to step? What are you not going to step? Till we learn that we can work together in a trusting way. You know, us of the district and the district of us and whatever it makes. But I couldn't agree in all faith now to plan to reopen everything, because then there will be another 6, you know, will be forever to do. So that's mine.
Dr. Warrior and everybody else, you know, I'm not advocating for this, I'm just making a thought. Maybe this ought to be a dual track. First of all, I don't want to sit here and wait to schedule a mediation and however long it takes to select a mediator and then mediate and not have any work done. On the other hand, it seems a waste of everybody's time and effort to start over. So if the consensus here is to pursue mediation, I would suggest at the same time we look at the existing plan and tweak it, whether it's Mershon's recommendations, whether Mr. Browning and his committee maybe modify some of those recommendations or offer some new ones, whether it's identifying 2 or 3 sections of this plan and try and up front agree with Mr. Brown and Dr. Warrior on how we're going to measure progress. It may take no more than a conference call to agree on some of these things. Now, the academic achievement piece is a lot more difficult, granted, and frankly, it's the most important longer term. Near term, some of these other things that are more quantifiable Not that they're easy to accomplish, because if they were, they'd have been accomplished already. So if the feeling is that mediation has some value, fine, but I don't want to stop trying to make the current plan and the deliverables that are expected from that plan. We got to keep moving forward. We don't have the time. There'll be another election, and maybe everybody's reelected, or there's new people. I mean, we
Right.
don't have time.
And I agree with you, and one of the places I suggest is at the last equity committee, Mr. Browning and the group said, we're going to send back to you, to the board, the 2019 plan. Tell us what you like of it, what you don't like of it. Are you going to support it all? I mean, that's the work the ball is in your court. Mr. Browning's equity committee has already sent you back the report that you never made any decision around, that left us at a disagreement, Dr. Moore believing this is what he should report, and our believing this is what should be reported. So I say that I agree with you. And then Tony and I discussed that. We would not stop, the meetings, but start that there's a place to start. And Mr. Browning has already the equity committee has already batted that back into your court. And now the responsibility is to you is to respond to that.
So if we were to pursue this joint track, which I don't disagree with, I think that makes sense, because I am concerned moving forward that we will make some agreement and find ourselves in 2 or 3 months again in the same conversation, and I don't want that to happen.
But I think that's where the dual track will make sense, because
Right,
I
it
think
makes
we have
sense.
to go back to the judge, because we have to let the judge know what's happening. That was one of the biggest issues she had before. Not only did you all not do this, but you didn't keep me informed. They had to actually request from us that you're behind. You need to submit this report.
Right. So,
And
so if I
so
could,
she, and so you look at that, and she said, to maybe talk to somebody, the mediator, somebody, because it'll be up to her. If we don't agree, the judge will make a decision. And so, it's my passionate plea for, we can do both, but, I really think there is some value, and I believe if the board would even agree to look at the document, it's 25 pages, but it's a fast read, and I've read it over and over and over, trying to make sure that we can stay abreast of that too, because what we think sometimes is not the way the court is going to function or respond.
so what I hear here, we're not at the point of consensus, but some possibility of moving forward on a joint track of approaching the court for mediation, as well as attempting to work together based on the 2019 recommendations, which my request would be, we have these recommendations in the form of a PowerPoint. It's hard to read them that way. I would like a full document that lays them out one by one. I can create it myself, or I can,
We don't do that.
direct the district to do it.
Dr. Moxley did a 6 or 8 page, and you don't have to speak with that, but she has a column that says this was what it would cost the district to do it, where she lays out one by one those things. So, that's all that level. Have you all looked at that level? When we talk about not redoing or reinventing the wheel, that kind of analysis was made. Maybe it needs to be updated.
What I'm suggesting is that we take the 2019 recommendations that Ms. Green put in PowerPoint form. We as a board have a conversation. We go thoroughly and clearly through those with this board, not that board, this board. With this board, we go through those recommendations. We make some decisions on what we are accepting and what we are not of the recommendations, and we charge the superintendent based on those recommendations. In conjunction and collaboration with the NAACP, we talk to them first, and we have a conversation about the recommendations, and then we move forward from there. I think that what was put together by Dr. Moxley in 2019 was under potentially a different board. I would like this board to go back and review that work as this board and come to some consensus about the recommendations that were done by the Equity Committee.
I respect that. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, and I agree, because even for the board to be involved in that process says then that you have some shared level of awareness, about the issues and the documents.
I also think this board is a different board than the previous board.
That's true.
I think that in that conversation, we have a conversation as a board. We then meet with the NAACP, and we talk about where the board is, because we can't, unless we're at a particular kind of meeting, we can't adopt and agree, we can't vote on things. Like in this meeting, we can't vote. But if we're going to move forward to vote, to create some kind of policy, we have to create a structure to do that. We have to create a structure as a board, because this is the only space we can talk, and we have to create a structure with the NAACP, because again, this is the space where we talk collectively. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, it does to me.
So what I'm hearing is we bring an item, I'll place it on workshop, the next workshop, regardless of whose it is, and provide the 54 recommendations along, in order to have a fruitful conversation, along with the work that the district has done or lack thereof regarding those particular recommendations. And then based on that workshop, we can bring an item, whether it's that same night, within a actual business meeting, to adopt what recommendations we would fully implement, and then we would bring those back to the NAACP. NAACP would have to acknowledge that those recommendations, because we've got to collectively agree, and once we have that, that would be notifying the court. These would be the new criteria, whatever that new criteria would be. These are the strategies that we'll be working on as agreed upon between the NAACP and school boards.
Can I switch the order of that a bit? Because I don't want it to be discussed by the board and then voted on the board without including the NAACP in that
Exactly.
conversation.
Right.
So I want to make
Exactly.
sure that either if we do this at workshop, that the NAACP is included in that workshop, or that we do it in workshop and then we have time to meet with the NAACP before it's brought to a business meeting. Either forms of that is fine, but I don't want to make a decision outside of that engagement.
We should not decide anything that we don't agree with. That's where the problem has been in the past, the assumption of agreement, when in fact there hasn't necessarily been. And I would add to what you just recommended, Dr. Schiff, is that part of reviewing the recommendations, any recommendation that we accept or that we discuss with Mr. Brown and Dr. Warrior are very specific measurement standards associated with them, so there's no misunderstanding in terms of expectation.
And that may take more than one meeting. That may take more than one workshop. If there are 54 or 89 or whatever recommendations there are, the likelihood we're going to get through that
So,
in 3 hours is,
and looking at
negligible.
those 54 recommendations, they are as they were intended recommendations. They're not SMART goals or they're not specific. So
That's right.
maybe the next
So we
step
convert them.
is, before I bring it, I could work with Dr. Warrior, Mr. Brown, and saying, this is the goal. This is the recommendation. Is this an appropriate goal as requested, as you just said?
If I could make a suggestion, with this process, I like the dual because Dr. Warrior and I were adamant that we're not going to interfere with Mr. Browning in the Equity Committee.
That's what I was thinking about when we were
We
talking about
we were adamant,
recommendations.
no, we're not going to do that. But I also, with Mr. Browning's expertise, that he be included as we did with Michonne.
That's my
Absolutely.
que- that was my statement.
Also, if we do this right, ladies and gentlemen, you have your annual report if you do it right.
good point, good point.
Mr. Browning and his committee, being a part of this with these recommendations, it shows substance. That not whether the school district throw what they had in there, if we collectively agree that, okay, these are the recommendations that the board is gonna make permanent. Now, Mr. Browning and his committee has something to work from to say, hey, Your Honor, we presented these recommendations, which was a passover from the previous equity committee. We are in agreement with 40 of the 54 or 50 of the 54, but this shows the judge that there's something being done. But I still say, and one of the things, Dr. Jones, our attorney is trying to get Judge Maynard. She doesn't cost.
Say that again, Coach.
She's trying to get as the mediator, Judge Maynard.
Okay.
Mr. Knox costs each of us $450 an hour, but Judge Maynard is free. So that's what we are working to do. But I think it's paramount that each of you have a personal understanding of this document called the joint plan and stop listening to the rhetoric and all the foolishness, because they didn't sit in the room with Dr. Warrior and I. They didn't fight these battles up and down these highways. They didn't get in those rooms and be bullied. So we were there, and we did the best we could under those circumstances with a high-powered law firm steady telling us what's going to be unconstitutional. So,
And that is one thing that the board, and I know I don't need to tell you, is that Burkowski said that there were some things that they thought were unconstitutional.
that's correct.
So, you know, you will certainly need to review that with your attorneys, and I know that I don't need to tell you that, but that was part of, the issue.
And one of those was dealing with the committee recommendations, and she said it's a little different here because this is a federal mandate.
Right.
And usually we don't have committees that are saying, okay, you need to do this, but it's a whole different ballgame with the federal mandate. And I just wanted to make sure when we were talking about the recommendations, how we were tying that in with the equity committee so that we're always involved with the NAACP and the equity committee, so we all know what we're doing.
yes. And the other thing is, we must remember, any recommendations that we make, if we do it collectively, are not subject to constitutionality, or it's a quota, or it's this. The Judge Graham made that clear. He said, if I impose it, it can be a quota. But if the two entities agree on it, it's an agreement.
Right.
It's not a quota. So these are the things that you as board members need to understand, not coming from Tony Brown or Dr. Warrior, but letting this individual who doesn't have a dog in the race tell you this is what the judge meant.
And I would like to say to the committee and to you, Mr. Sara, that any time that we are going to try judiciously, that when I come to you and say this is an issue, that I'm going to have some documentation. To be just discounted and say we're only going to listen, you know, to the superintendent. I understand your relationship with the superintendent, but I am going to pledge myself to say that I'm not going to come to you with something that when I say that I want to be able to supply, you know, back it up with information. And I hope you hold us and your superintendent accountable to that standard.
Absolutely. It is up to the superintendent to ensure that we get out of this court order in terms of the work that he is responsible to do. So you are 100% right in that, Dr. Warrior.
And get out of the court order. One of the things to go back, we had the Voting Rights Act for 50 years. It was never made a law. Let's not concentrate on getting out of anything.
There was no disrespect in that. What I meant was to close the gap, to close the achievement gap, to reach unitary status so that children benefit from the results, so that children are receiving the full access
But I want you
to
to,
education that they are entitled to.
so that means, let's throw that word unitary status in the trash.
Let's throw it in the trash. But we
Because-
are here to serve. I am here to serve the people. I'm here to serve you. You are my constituent. So even though Dr. Moore reports to us, to me as a board member, we are here to work together and to serve the desire of the people. So yes, let's do it. If you want to meet with us, or if you desire that you want to work together on this revised joint meeting, these bullet points that we're talking about, I'm totally on board. If you desire that you want to go to mediation, I may not be fully on board, but if you think that that's the best way moving forward, I will support the will of the NAACP in this, just the same way that I would support the desire of the and the will of the Equity Committee and the work that they're doing. If they decide, you know, we want to work in a separate room or receive different data because it would benefit the work that they're going to accomplish, I would absolutely get behind them and support them in that as well. So we're on the same page, you know, in terms of what we want to accomplish. We just got to get there. So, but I do have a question, Mr. Brown.
Yes.
These items here that we are agreeing to moving forward, is this okay for you? Or do you still want to, do you want to do this and do you still want to pursue mediation? Or are we doing this only?
This is a dual
I'm
track.
waiting,
This is a
dual
dual
track.
track.
Okay, just
Be-
want to clarify.
Because, see, it is paramount that you understand rather than having somebody pass on to you. You, as a teacher, Dr. Jones, you know, you did the little thing in class, and Mrs. Bamberg, where you whispered something in one kid's ear and tell him to
Telephone.
pass it around the
Yeah,
room.
I know, telephone.
It's not gonna be, so that back and forth, but if and I like Dr. Schiff's thing, let's do it virtual. So it won't be no violation of the Sunshine Law and all of this other stuff, so that everybody can be aware of how this animal is supposed to travel. And that the Equity Committee, and if you read it, read this document. Judge Kathleen Williams definitively says, that's a whole different animal called the Equity Committee. And one of the things that I'm gonna say, and I'll leave it alone, everybody was worried about equity this past week. Do you know who named that committee? Dr. Warren and I wanted, where is she? We wanted it to be compliance. But the school district went haywire. Oh, that's too strong a word, that's too strong a word. And now, 3 years later, equity becomes a problem. Wow. But we wanted it to be compliance committee. The school district wanted it equity committee. So you see how this animal, but we have to do our work regardless of what outsiders say.
Right.
We got a job to do.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
I'm looking at the recommendations that Mr. Browning just sent and reviewing them again, and, you know, looking for specifics, and it's interesting because I really like the way this is laid out as far as a report card, I get that. And monitoring is evaluating, by the way, because that's what principals do. They monitor in the classrooms. They are evaluating the teaching. That's monitoring. I'm looking at some of these and I'm thinking, what about the charter schools? They're included in this.
Can I say something? I had a charter school principal call me to his office and say, Mr. Brown, would you please help me to follow this DSEG order?
That is
And
correct.
that's Mr. Dodds. He has invited us into
What
his
school?
school.
Sebastian?
Sebastian Charter Junior High, former
Yeah, yeah.
assistant principal, Sebastian High
But
School.
here's my concern. Like, for example, I just saw one that just jumped out at me. That each school should have 15% of the students in the school's population should be black, because that's the percentage of the district. My question is, what about charter schools?
Well, that was answered in one of the questions by Ms. DeGresta. That's been answered. They need to comply.
And
Right, because their charter actually, and we have another charter that's coming to us that's saying, we are targeting kids of poverty and kids that are underserved. And here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do X, Y, Z. We're going to get transportation. We're gonna, and that one rings to me about a certain school that when they put their charter forward, they said they were gonna do that.
Yes.
And now it's changed.
yes,
Question is why?
can I answer?
That's a whole
Sure.
other story.
Because the district felt that they couldn't force them. But when Dr. LaCarver, he first put it out, and he had everybody do a work plan, all charter schools. North County, it was about 3 of them instantly brought their plans to the table. But one individual told me, well, Mr. Brown, why don't the NAACP look the other way? These are the things that are in our toolbox. But I was so honored that Mr. Dobbs called me, Dr. Dobbs, and said, I need to meet with you. Help me make this work for my school.
Well, and the reason why I bring that up is not to target the charter schools, but to say that one comment I remember reading at some point with the legalese paperwork was all schools, including charter
Right,
schools,
that's in
need
there.
to follow this. And
Yeah.
so the question is, then why aren't we including them in these conversations?
And we need to.
And that's an excellent point, Ms. Rosario, and we talked about
It's
that. and I
Mrs.
thought that was
Barrenborg
very
is saying it,
Barrenborg.
sure.
Oh, was that Mrs. Barrenborg? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's an excellent point, and we reached out when Chris Taylor was on the Equity Committee, and he was also the liaison, to start that dialogue and the conversation with the charters, that the federal court, and Judge Graham said that they are charters, and they moved into a district that was under an act, under a desegregation order, and so there is an expectation that they comply, and they should be included. I support.
So let's give them a seat at the
So
table.
what we did last year, and we had that same conversation with Michonne and the Equity Committee. Michonne had them submit information they all presented at the Equity Committee. And that was a process we're getting ready to repeat with Mr. Browning, so you can see where they are, and if it's notifying the court that, they're not making this progress or that progress, and that would be the appropriate steps to take.
Just a comment on the charter, North County Elementary and
Is now exiting.
Sebastian Charter Junior High are both providing transportation now, and they have for a while, so those numbers are going up a little bit with Dr. Keaton and Dr. Dodds. But just talking about, I said first I really didn't want to do mediation. If that's what the NAACP wishes to do, and I think the board reaches consensus on that, that's okay. We can move forward as long as there's a dual track. But I personally, I don't ever say I want to get rid of the DSEG order, but it'll be a wonderful world when all of that is embedded into our classrooms on a daily basis, so that we don't even have to think about it, Again, the money that's been spent should have been on students, and it's just that we don't even have to talk about it because everything looks good, That's where I'd like to be.
Can I, because I really wasn't done with my conversation about
go
charter
ahead.
school, but that's all right. That's all right. You had some valid points. Dr. Moore, you said, well, that can go back to the judge, but I'd like to say, why not invite them to one of these meetings to have a seat at the table? We're putting out that olive branch and saying, why don't you come and listen and read the documentation and understand what we are trying to do and be part of the solution, and give them that opportunity to really know from day one that, they have a seat at this table, they can come here and sit and listen to this and have input. But in the end, they are going to be responsible for doing the same things that we are doing.
And I support that too, rather than just saying, here's something you need to comply with, that they be invited to the table, and that we trust that they are indeed operating under good faith and are not trying to be schools of flight, So I agree that they should be at the table and share in, the workings of how this impacts the district.
So if I could just draw everyone's attention to the screen, Dr. Warrior. We've put some bullets up there. I think those bullets accurately reflect what we've agreed upon to this point. If everyone would just take a second to review, we're happy to modify or to adjust as any way needed. There are bullets that are missing before, I think that are missing before we could end tonight's meeting, one of which is the March 15th report. My recommendation there would be, therein lies the report for March 15th. This is what was agreed upon at our last meeting, if that is the consensus. No more, no less. And then the other thing would be the elephant in the room, which is the annual report from last December. So let me start with, are we okay? Do we have a level of consensus around providing these bullets to the court on the 15th regarding this is the progress report for the 15th?
Sure.
My immediate response to that is, I always, because I know where we've gone with this, a little time to digest it, but that we do, it's in there, include that we are, oh, okay, I see it, a dual path, and, okay, I see it, I'm sorry, I missed it.
I would, you don't have in there, and I think if it's going to the judge,
Mr. Brown,
Oh.
okay.
since it's going to the judge, I think it should be inclusive of the fact, because she put it in her 2019 report, that we have agreed that the Equity Committee chair be integral part of all discussions relative to the joint plan.
Could you say that again, Tony, please?
I said that the equity chair be an integral part of all the discussions relative to the joint plan.
Well, I think that bears some thought. Does that remove their supposed, I mean, because the Equity Committee is a strange animal. And I think we need to think about that, because
No
the
offense.
chair actually is a single, I mean,
Well,
I think
I mean,
that needs a little.
We could
thought.
define it as the equity committee because it's in the transcript. She referenced it in the transcript. She said if we did it, as well as the equity committee having the report submitted. We can stand down on it, but I think somewhere we can put it in. Dr. Warrior likes to see it.
Yeah, she's got to look at it. Yes, I can see.
I have a suggestion. In bullet point 4, notify the court of the newly adopted goals and measurement standards.
Oh, I like that.
Or keep KPIs, key performance indicators, terminology classic right out of business school. I don't care which one you use.
They're both relevant.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
but again-
what that says is that we'll notify them of newly adopted. We're not saying that we've adopted those tonight yet, but that we're going to it. I mean,
We will
What does
notify
that
the
say?
court of.
We will notify the court of newly adopted goals and measurement standards or key performance indicators, your choice.
Or upon adoption, comma, notify the court of newly adopted goals, yada, yada.
Fine.
That's good.
But without that, this is where we've run amok in the past, is we've
Right,
not defined outcomes.
I just was wondering, I didn't want us to think that
needs to
we
be in.
adopted some tonight, that there's work.
Okay.
Can we combine this as our two reports?
Well, they lie independently. So if we come to consensus that this satisfies the March 15th, that's fine. That is done. But what is still pending would be we need to have something in there regarding the annual report, whether it's the 18-month process, or we say that, as part of the mediation, we're going to, get additional clarification regarding the content or the appropriate way to report on that annual report. And maybe that, and as soon as we're done with that mediation, we'll provide that that annual report based on the mediation. And I
Should we-
think
That-
that,
Should
go ahead,
we put
Dr.
that as a
Warrior.
bulletin point then? Should we
That makes-
include that? in this?
I'll fix it.
What'd you think? What'd you think, Dr. Warrior?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, because, we could get some clarification. Can we go, yeah, I like that.
We haven't resolved the equity committee part.
The part of their participation. Doc, are you marinating on the equity committee part?
I'm sorry, Tony, the
Are
math is
you
muffling.
marinating on the equity committee part in this process?
He's saying that's in the transcript.
Oh, you mean at the moment? No, I wasn't at the moment, but I can
What if
think
it
about
were-
it, because, yeah.
Invite-
Because,
Invite the
my
equity,
only issue again is the fact whether we just want, how to incorporate the group, because the court seems to really give great weight to the equity committee's input.
Yeah.
so could it be, invite the equity committee chairperson or their representative to participate in in the meetings of the school board and the NAACP. The Equity Committee chairperson can then report back to the Equity Committee about what happened at those meetings. We can
Why
either
not
invite the whole
this
Equity
question?
Committee or the chairperson, who can then report.
Why not put this to the equity committee and see what they think would be appropriate that gives everybody a voice, how they want to handle it?
Could we,
That we'd like to have some involved in how do they see it.
How do
Yes.
they see it?
given that the chair is here, and I think might be chomping at the bit to weigh in.
He hasn't left yet.
Could we actually ask the chair his thought about how this should go?
I offered that to him a bit ago, and he was too shy to accept.
God, Kevin, they never.
Well, the one thing I say is, as board members, you guys don't necessarily, I mean, you say somebody else doesn't speak for you, so, which I think is always a good point.
It's our
You need to
board.
come to a consensus. No one of you can be the voice of.
Yeah, it's our board.
So, again, I think that it bears discussion with his committee about what is an agreeable or appropriate way to be involved or informed. Because they might, I don't know what they.
Well, that's why we're going to ask.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Actually, I wanted to, it's important to me. It's very important to me. The 53 years is important. The attending school in this district is important. Working in this district is important. And seeing that we create a better future is important. And like I said at the Equity Committee, I think we have the right people in place to do what needs to be done. And it was important enough that, if I sound negative at times, please forgive me. It was important enough that, when somebody mentioned to me that judge's comments and for those 25 pages, and I did read all 25 because I forget where I got it from, but how can we understand if this is important to us and 50 years worth of importance? Yes, it's probably a contract thing. You talked about that. But what the judge said in there mattered, and how we got here and why they went to court is in there, and what happened during that session. All of that is important in my understanding and reading. And I don't know what the lady looks like, but I could hear her through those words and what she intended and where her frustration level was. I love this dual process, Mr. Barefoot. I appreciate the work that all of you are doing. And when you mentioned the charter schools, you're exactly right, in my opinion, that it does pertain to them. But I remember being at a discussion with the charter schools before, and one thing they said was, well, if the district isn't setting the example in doing it, why do they expect us to do it?
Yes.
Now, this was years ago, and I think it still stands for today. So I think the effort is there. I will be here as much as possible, I guess, on a night like tonight. Some nights I have my hands full of kids, but on a night like tonight when I'm free, or whatever night I'll make it, it's important enough for me to be here to hear you and to provide whatever little bit my tiny little brain can give you, and as well as, regardless of what the rest of the committee says, it's important enough to me to be here, observe, take in, and see where we can get where we have, I think, what Indian River can be, the best district in the state of Florida. So just that, and if we say we love kids, it reflects in what we do. How can we love all kids, but we don't love all faculty? And that's where just my little piece of, it starts with me. I love all my black, brown, white, Hispanic kids, everybody, but I should be able to reflect that as a hiring administrator in the faculty too. So you can almost tell at times when I'm talking how important this is to me, having been here, having lived it, having worked among some of these people that were in this room on the last week. And a lot of them are the finest people around. but we all do need upgrade the mindset. And I think you said that some of the terminology, sometimes people have it in a different mindset. Like the equity word that you talked about. Equity is a dirty word to some people sometimes. Don't know why, but I can only guess, and I think we just need to get there, and we have the right people here. And I'm tired, but I'm in for the long haul.
Can I ask you a specific question, though?
Yes, ma'am.
Which I think was one of the things we wanted you to weigh in on equity committee participation at the meetings we're talking about, whether you believe that should be you specifically, whether your entire committee should be invited, how you think that process should work.
I want to be. I can't commit them. I don't know what obligations they have. I would like to see the whole group here, but I don't know what other obligations people have. It's important to me to have input. Like I think I said when I got to 2018 and I saw it was back to the one teacher per elementary, middle, and high school, almost blew my mind. I'm like, in 1967, the judge said something different. Two or at least two or more. And we're going to go back 50 years and say, go. So anyway, yes.
So for this part of the conversation, could we agree that the equity committee chairperson will be invited to and included in these meetings?
Why don't we just invite the whole committee?
That's fine. Invite,
And who
But-
can
They can come, they come. If
Some
they
might
can't,
be
they can't. We'll get some representation, for sure.
Right.
And the more productive the meetings are, the more representation we'll get.
okay.
If we start listening to one another instead of talking past one another, not suggesting that's the case tonight, I guarantee you, we'll have a full house most nights.
Thank you.
And I know our two equity committee members are involved tonight as well. So,
You know
One
what
of
would
them
be
is on-
really interesting? We start a dual track. We schedule however long it takes to schedule mediation. And at the last minute, we cancel mediation because we've made so much progress that we don't want to have mediation or we don't need it. That would sort of be nirvana.
yeah.
But I don't know how long it takes to schedule mediation.
Well, we should know, one of the things is getting Judge Maynard, because I heard Dr. Jones ringing in my ear, we're not going to spend another dollar, we're not going, and we have a limited dollar to spend.
Sure.
So if Judge Maynard is available, she is a sitting judge. And she was one of the people that Judge Williams recommended. So Judge Williams trusts her expertise.
Okay, have we resolved this part of the meeting?
I'm
Almost.
looking at one of the,
We still need the,
Yeah,
Oh,
so,
no,
so
we
the
did.
only thing we have now to decide is the annual report.
No, the annual report, if you
Okay.
notice I'm going from the bottom, the 1, 2, 3, the fourth bullet from the bottom, we just highlighted it. It says that one of the issues that we'll address in mediation will be the annual report, and once we get direction on how to complete that, upon the completion of mediation, we will submit that annual report. And I think that,
well, the issue for me is upon completion of mediation, because, mediation could be 1 session, 2 session, 4. I mean, we had several, over the
good
summer.
point, good
So
point.
so as soon as we can get some direction on that through the mediation process.
Perfect. And I think what I'll do is I won't change the content of this tomorrow, just as I have done in the past, I'll give it a proof under a pair of eyes that have slept, prepare it for joint signature and send it over to Mr. Brown and Dr. Warrior to review. We actually have a full week to submit this almost, so that's, we're really ahead of the game.
Let me ask a question of Katie or Dr. Moore. We're in recess for the business meeting, which we have to reconvene. Not much left to do, but should we have a formal vote at the business meeting on this process that we've agreed to? I mean, do
I
we
don't think we
need
need
it?
to vote on the process. What we will need to vote on is the recommendations and outcomes that we all agreed to, because once we vote on them, then it becomes, in essence.
Well, that's what I'm asking. We should probably memorialize this in some form or fashion.
I don't think
So,
we need to vote on it. I
I-
think
I-
because we already have
we don't.
consensus
We have
to it.
consensus.
Is that right?
You see,
That's right. I think
Chair-
we've already made a determination that the superintendent can agree to go to mediation. We don't have to have a formal vote of the board.
okay,
But if you
that
want to
was the
vote,
question.
if you want to vote on the mediation, that would be the thing to vote on, I guess.
Oh, okay.
If it's
But
necessary.
not this.
If you-
Should we, or do
These
we, do we
bullets,
have
only the
to?
mediation.
Sorry?
Not all of the bullets, only the mediation part. If we're
Right.
going to vote on anything, it would be the mediation
Mediation.
part. But we don't have to do that either, is that?
That's right.
Well, then
That's right.
let's not do it.
But my concern is just that, because we thought we discussed the 2019 report fairly extensively in workshops, and to the point where I thought the board had agreed upon something, then we hit a snag, then suddenly no one wants to, the responsibility is we didn't vote on that. So to me, it seems like there needs to be some process through the board to officially memorialize the work that's done in the committee in the same way when the superintendent workshops an issue, that it moves and there's something that happened. Because I don't want to, to say, okay, we agree on this here, and then here, 3 months down the road, somebody saying, well, we didn't really vote on that, or we didn't really discuss that, and, because we've assigned all of these meetings, to which I find is somewhat interesting and concern me. We have an established board, then we close that out and move into talking about the order. So it's like if we're going to meet, you've already met this number of hours. Why wasn't this, board level discussion? Because it seems like the historical issue around remembering to take things that have been discussed at these workshops to the board.
So what
So
we
I-
could do, if we needed to vote, we are in recess of our business meeting. We could go back, we could amend the agenda, we can add an action item. We can,
That's what I'm asking, exactly.
yeah, if there's some reason that we need to vote on it, we can do that fairly easily tonight. What I hear Dr. Warrior saying is expressing a concern that when things happen not in a business meeting, but in a workshop or a discussion session, that they don't get memorialized in the same way, and then there's less clarity about what the board has actually agreed to, and this distinction between consensus and voted on gets confusing. What I hear you asking for is clarification, that we vote on something so that we don't have that confusion going forward. Am I hearing you correctly?
What you're hearing is that there's some way that you memorialize that and whatever the policy is of the board, so that the issue is, well, we didn't really decide that, we just discussed that in a workshop. And
Let's
so,
just make it
what,
easy.
There's no downside to doing that, so we're
Let's
going to
just
do
do
it.
it. Well,
So,
yeah.
so what's next?
Let's just,
I do have I'm going to throw a wrench in this for a quick second.
we'll just amend.
The workshops that are included in the first bullet, conduct a workshop. I heard that it might be several workshops because there's so much to actually discuss. I would recommend, and I don't know what you think, about a day retreat, so that we're just all here. We can possibly have lunch brought in, where everybody is here in one day. We get through as much as we can, hopefully everything that we can do in a day, and then hopefully call it a day, so that we don't have to worry about scheduling another day, and that might be another several weeks later, and then another several weeks later, 3 hours here, 3 hours there. The next thing you know, it's the end of the school year. Whereas if we can do a day retreat with the hope and the goal of getting it all accomplished in one day, I think we'd have a better opportunity to accomplish a lot.
You mean
What
the
are your
workshop?
thoughts?
I mean, the,
In lieu of several workshops,
Well, it says workshop / plural.
but
And a
we didn't
workshop
talk
can-
about a
can be
day
all day.
retreat as opposed
is that
to
the mediation
workshops.
workshops you're referencing?
The first one.
No.
No.
Workshop
Mr.
to go
Brown.
over the 2019
Just to go over
recommendations
the
and create goals
recommendations
around
from the
those.
2019.
I think, we can do that.
Are you on board with that? What do you all think, everybody?
As long as we
I-
have breaks every,
Yeah,
hour
I'm
and a
not
half or
excited
2
about a day
hours.
meeting, but I think you're right. But my concern is for people who work.
Me
that
too.
That it's hard
Me
to make
too.
it for a full day
Overheard
working.
Ms.
I'm sorry?
Ms. Pendler was just telling me, as long as I'm out of here by 3,
I'll meet on, I know I'll meet on Saturday, I won't meet on Sunday. I will meet on Saturday, I'm available. I know I see open eyes, I'm sorry, but I'll be available. If it works and it's gonna get, if it's gonna be productive for us, and
It's
reach
also-
the outcome.
It's not fair to staff.
It's up to,
It's not fair to staff.
Let's just do 2 tentative dates, and then I can take it to our people, and we can
Okay.
get a consensus.
all right.
And I would recommend for that workshop, we have a facilitator to really help us through that as far as our, desired outcomes, so that we keep moving at a pace that we can reach those desired outcomes.
But then we
That's
have
a
to
good
agree on
idea,
a
but
facilitator.
what
I agree with
facilitate-
you.
There's a lot of people trained in facilitation here.
Yeah, my only objection to that is I never then get to eat with you guys, but okay.
Wow, way to go, Doc.
Aw,
She can eat at the same time.
and we miss you in that, too.
Yeah, well, but Dr. Moore didn't, his word, he promised me muffins or something from one.
You never came, and I could throw down with Deb Long, too, to cook, too, so.
We
We
could
can
send
keep
it-
you, we can keep you up in the virtual, in the virtual world, and you can eat with us, Dr. Warrior.
And we'll send you some food by Amazon.
I was gonna say, yeah, we'll send out Panera or something.
We could do that.
I think we're reaching the point of delirium.
Okay,
Really?
It's good,
I
though.
think
you know, we're not.
we've accomplished a lot. We've had some good discussions, some good ideas. We will memorialize after we reconvene and maybe take a 5-minute break. But anything else that anybody cares to
No.
raise? Dr. Warrior, thank you for your contribution. Dr. Jones?
Oh, no, I was just saying goodbye to Dr.
Oh, you're saying goodbye to Doc. Everybody's waving goodbye to you. Now, there's one last thing.
The camera's over here, Peggy.
Pardon me?
The camera is this way. If you want to wave, she'll see you waving this way.
No, I want to wave this way.
But there's one more thing if there's a consensus, and that is that we sing happy birthday.
Yes.
Oh,
to,
wow.
to Mr. Now now you're going to get embarrassed. Does anybody want to lead the
Yes.
Come on.
Yes.
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tony. Happy birthday to you.
Are you sufficiently embarrassed now?
Happy birthday.
Good luck putting that in the minutes.
Happy birthday.
You owe me one. I know. Meeting's adjourned.
Yeah, thank you all for.